I stood frozen in the crowded gallery, champagne flute trembling in my hand as Eleanor Chen's voice carried across the room. "Rebecca, what a lovely surprise." Her perfectly manicured hand squeezed my arm with practiced affection that never quite reached her eyes. 6 years had passed since I'd last seen my former mother-in-law, but time hadn't softened the sharp edges of her smile. "Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. I heard your exhibition was tonight. I simply had to see what you've been up to," she continued, scanning the crowded art gallery with an appraising glance. Her eyes lingered on the collection of mixed media pieces I'd spent months creating, each one documenting a chapter in my journey since leaving her son. "My friends at the Portland Arts Foundation speak highly of your work," Eleanor added, lowering her voice to a conspiratorial whisper. "Such a shame things didn't work out between you and Andrew. I always told him you had potential, despite—" "Well, you know?" Before I could respond, a small voice called out from across the room. "Mom, Mrs. Rivera loves the butterfly piece. She wants to talk about commissioning something for her daughters." Olivia bounded toward us, her dark curls bouncing with each step, her eyes, Andrew's eyes, bright with excitement. She stopped abruptly, noticing Eleanor for the first time. Eleanor's champagne glass slipped from her fingers, shattering on the hardwood floor. "Who is this?" she whispered, though the recognition was already dawning on her face. "This is my daughter Olivia," I said, placing a protective hand on Liv's shoulder. "Liv, this is Mrs. Chen." Eleanor's complexion had gone ashen, her gaze moving rapidly between Olivia's face and mine. "But that's impossible. You couldn't. Andrew couldn't." "Actually," I said, feeling 6 years of anger and vindication rising in my chest, "it seems your son wasn't the one with fertility issues after all." My reflection stared back at me from the bathroom mirror, eyes wide and disbelieving as I held the positive pregnancy test in trembling hands. The blue plus sign seemed to pulse with an impossible truth. I was pregnant. After 3 years of failed attempts, countless tests, and monthly disappointments, there it was. Undeniable proof. "Rebecca?" Andrew's voice called from downstairs. "The realtor will be here in 20 minutes. Have you finished packing the guest bathroom?" I quickly wrapped the test in tissue paper and tucked it into my pocket. This wasn't how I'd planned to tell him, not with boxes stacked around us and the imminent arrival of the woman who would help sell our home. But after 7 months of strained silence between us, maybe this would be the miracle we needed. With one last steadying breath, I headed downstairs to our West Hills Colonial, the house we'd bought 3 years ago with such optimism. Andrew stood in the kitchen, meticulously wrapping our wedding china in newspaper. Even in casual clothes, he maintained the precise, controlled demeanor that had impressed me when we'd first met at a charity fundraiser 6 years earlier. "Andrew, I need to talk to you." My voice sounded stronger than I felt. He didn't look up from his task. "Can it wait? We need to have everything boxed before Sharon arrives." "It's important." I moved closer, pulling the pregnancy test from my pocket. Andrew finally looked up, his expression guarded. The emotional distance between us had grown so vast in recent months that sometimes I wondered if we were still the same people who had exchanged vows beneath cherry blossoms in Eleanor's carefully manicured garden. "I'm pregnant." I placed the test on the counter between us. Andrew stared at it, his face blank. "That's not possible." "Clearly, it is." I gestured to the test. 3 years of trying, and it finally happened. He shook his head, taking a step back. "No, Becca, it's not possible." Something in his tone sent a chill through me. "What do you mean?" Andrew ran a hand through his dark hair, a rare gesture of discomposure from someone who prided himself on control. "I had a vasectomy 6 months ago." The world seemed to tilt beneath me. What? Why would you? Without telling me. My mother arranged it, he said, as if that explained everything. And in the Chen family, perhaps it did. Eleanor Chen's influence over her only son had been a shadow looming over our marriage from the beginning. After the third fertility specialist confirmed what we already knew, that I inherited the same condition as my father, she found a discreet surgeon, said it was better this way. Better? We were looking into IVF, surrogacy options. We had appointments scheduled next month. Those were never going to happen, Becca. Andrew's voice hardened. Mother made it clear, no one could know about the Chen family's issue. It was easier to let everyone think the problem was with you. The realization hit me like a physical blow. That's why she's been telling everyone I'm infertile? To protect your family's reputation? Andrew wouldn't meet my eyes. It's complicated. There are family business considerations, legacy issues. Rage and betrayal swelled within me. 3 years of pitying glances at family gatherings, of Eleanor's friends recommending fertility specialists and miracle diets, of Andrew's silence as his mother consoled him publicly for his wife's unfortunate condition. So whose child am I? Carrying? I finally asked, the question hanging in the air between us. Andrew's expression shifted from shock to hurt to something colder. I think that's obvious, isn't it? You've made your choice. My choice? You lied to me. For years. The injustice of his accusation burned through my shock. You let your mother spread rumors about me while you secretly had a procedure that guaranteed we'd never have children. I didn't invite anyone else into our marriage, he replied icily. I've suspected for some time that your late nights at the studio weren't just about your art. Marcus. He was talking about Marcus Wilson, my mentor at the Portland Arts Collective, a talented sculptor who had been nothing but a supportive friend during my darkest days of fertility struggles. There is nothing between Marcus and me, I said, fighting to keep my voice steady. This baby is a miracle. We need to figure out how this happened if you really had a vasectomy, but… I want you out by the end of the week, Andrew interrupted, his voice eerily calm. You can take whatever you brought into the marriage. I'll have my lawyer contact yours. Andrew, please. We need to talk about this. There has to be some explanation. The doorbell chimed, announcing the realtor's arrival. Andrew straightened his shoulders, instantly transforming back into the polished professional the world saw. I'll handle Sharon. You should start packing your personal items. Mother always said I should have had you sign a prenup. Seems she was right about that, too. 3 days later, I sat in Dr. Samantha Lopez's office, clutching the results of my blood work with numb fingers. So it's confirmed, I said, processing the information she'd just shared. I'm definitely pregnant, 8 weeks along. Dr. Lopez nodded, her kind eyes studying me carefully. And you said you and your husband had been trying for 3 years? She paused delicately. Becca, is there something else going on? You seem upset by news that would normally be celebrated. The whole story poured out. Andrew's revelation about his secret vasectomy, his mother's years of deception, the shattering of my marriage based on an assumption that couldn't possibly be true. I never cheated on him, I concluded, wiping away angry tears. But he won't even consider any other explanation. His mother has him convinced I betrayed them both. Dr. Lopez leaned forward. Becca, vasectomies aren't foolproof. There's approximately a 1 in 2,000 chance of spontaneous recanalization. Basically, the tubes can sometimes reconnect on their own. It's rare, but it happens. Hope flickered briefly before reality extinguished it. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Andrew won't believe that. Neither will Eleanor. They've already decided I'm guilty. Would your husband be willing to take a paternity test? We could do one safely during pregnancy with a simple blood draw around 10 weeks. I thought about the coldness in Andrew's eyes as he'd watched me pack my clothes, the way he'd recoiled when I'd tried to show him the information I'd found online about vasectomy failures. No, he's made up his mind. Dr. Lopez nodded sympathetically. Then let's focus on you and this baby. How are you feeling physically? Terrified, I admitted. I'm staying at a friend's apartment until I figure things out. I have some money saved from commissions, but not much. The divorce paperwork already arrived. One step at a time, she advised. Let's make sure you're getting proper prenatal care, and I can refer you to some resources that might help with your situation. I left the clinic with a folder of pamphlets, a prescription for prenatal vitamins, and the crushing weight of uncertainty. The crisp autumn air bit at my cheeks as I walked to the bus stop, no longer able to afford the luxury of Uber rides or the BMW that had come with my married life. My phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. Studio space available all afternoon. Art therapy session. No charge for emotional crises. Despite everything, I smiled. Marcus had been nothing but supportive since I'd shown up at his door with 2 suitcases and shattered dreams. His spare room wasn't much, just a twin bed and dresser in the corner of his Pearl District loft. But it was shelter while I figured out my next move. The bus crawled through afternoon traffic toward downtown Portland. Through the window, I watched couples strolling along the waterfront, families with strollers, lives that seemed impossibly stable compared to mine. Just weeks ago, I'd been Eleanor Chen, up-and-coming mixed media artist with a successful husband and a beautiful home. Now I was Rebecca Mitchell again, my maiden name reclaimed in a moment of defiance when signing the preliminary divorce papers, pregnant, essentially homeless, and branded as an adulteress by the family that had once welcomed me. By the time I reached the converted warehouse that housed the Portland Arts Collective, my determination had solidified. I might have lost everything else, but I still had my talent, my integrity, and now, unexpectedly, a child to fight for. Marcus was working on a large metal sculpture when I arrived, his tall frame bent over a welding torch. He killed the flame when he noticed me, pushing up his safety goggles. "Rough day?" he asked, taking in my expression. Dr. Lopez confirmed everything. I'm definitely pregnant. And there's a medical explanation for how it could have happened despite Andrew's vasectomy, but he won't even listen. Marcus set down his tools and pulled up a stool for me. At 45, he was 15 years my senior and had become something of a protective older brother since I'd joined the collective 2 years ago. "I hate seeing what they're doing to you," he said. "Especially when a simple paternity test could clear everything up. Eleanor Chen doesn't want clarity. She wants control." I sank onto the stool, suddenly exhausted. She's been running Andrew's life for so long, I don't think he knows how to question her anymore. "So what's your plan now, Mama Bear?" Law. Nickname, though meant affectionately, made my new reality crash down on me. I need to find my own place, get more commissions, figure out how to be a single mother. The magnitude of it all threatened to overwhelm me. I don't even know where to start. "You start by breathing," Marcus said, his voice gentle but firm. "Then you remember that you're talented as hell, tougher than you think, and not actually alone." He gestured around the studio space. "Everyone here has your back, and I know a place you might be able to afford if you're willing to look east of 82nd Avenue. At this point, I'd live in a storage unit if it meant having my own space." "It's not quite that bad," Marcus laughed. "My cousin Diane owns a coffee shop called Horizon. The building has a small apartment upstairs that she's been using for storage. It needs work, but the rent would be reasonable. And she mentioned needing someone to help with the shop's marketing and maybe barista shifts. Could be a way to supplement your commission income." For the first time in days, I felt a glimmer of hope. "Do you think she'd consider someone with a baby on the way?" "Diane raised 2 kids on her own after her husband died. If anything, she'll probably adopt you on the spot." He squeezed my shoulder. "Want to head over there now?" I think you could use some of her cinnamon rolls anyway. The woman bakes like an angel when she's not swearing like a sailor. Horizon Coffee House turned out to be a cozy neighborhood establishment in a transitioning area of East Portland. Mismatched furniture, local art on the walls, and the rich aroma of freshly ground beans created an atmosphere that felt immediately welcoming. Behind the counter stood a woman with silver-streaked dark hair pulled into a messy bun, efficiently, managing the afternoon rush with good-natured authority. "Marcus, you handsome devil," she called out when she spotted us. "Grab a table. I'll be over once I finish with this line." 20 minutes later, Diane Taylor slid into the booth across from us, placing a plate of enormous cinnamon rolls in the center of the table. "So you're the talented Becca I've been hearing about," she said, studying me with keen brown eyes. "Marcus says you need a place to land." Something about her direct gaze made me want to be equally forthright. "I'm newly separated, newly pregnant, and newly in need of affordable housing and steady income. Not exactly an ideal tenant on paper." Diane's laugh was warm and genuine. "Honey, if I'd waited for ideal circumstances, I'd never have opened this place after Jason died. Sometimes the messy middle is where the best stories start." She took a sip of her coffee. "The apartment needs work, painting, deep cleaning, some minor repairs. But it's got good bones, decent light, and it's a straight shot down to the shop when you're ready to start work." "I haven't even asked about a job yet," I said, surprised. "Marcus mentioned you do graphic design as part of your art. I need new menus, a better website, maybe some branded merchandise. Plus, I'm always short-staffed on weekends." She shrugged. "Seems like we might be able to help each other out." "I don't know anything about making coffee," I admitted. "I don't know anything about websites," she countered. "But I'm a quick study, and Marcus says you are too." She pushed the cinnamon rolls closer to me. "Eat. Growing humans requires calories, and my food is better than whatever ramen nonsense. Marcus has been feeding you." After we'd eaten, Diane led us upstairs to show me the apartment. It was indeed cluttered with storage boxes and dusty furniture, but beneath the chaos, I could see the potential. Large windows overlooking the street, a small kitchenette, a separate bedroom, and a surprisingly spacious bathroom. "It's not the West Hills," Diane said, watching me take it all in. "But it's yours if you want it. Rent's $800, utilities included. I can take it out of your paychecks until you get settled." The kindness of her offer brought unexpected tears to my eyes. "Why would you do this for someone you just met?" Diane's expression softened. "Because 16 years ago, I was you, terrified, pregnant with my second, and suddenly widowed when Jason's heart gave out. Someone gave me a chance when I needed it most." She gestured around the apartment. "Consider this paying it forward." Later that night, back at Marcus's loft, I sat cross-legged on the twin bed, making lists of everything I needed to do. Sign the lease with Diane, file my response to Andrew's divorce petition, schedule my next prenatal appointment, start clearing. The apartment. My phone buzzed with an incoming call from a number I didn't recognize. Hesitantly, I answered. "Rebecca." Eleanor Chen's crisp voice sent an immediate chill through me. "I think it's time we spoke directly." "I have nothing to say to you," I replied, fighting to keep my voice steady. "Perhaps not, but you will listen. Andrew may be too blinded by hurt to see clearly, but I am not." Her tone was measured, calculating. "Whatever game you're playing with this pregnancy claim, it needs to end now." "It's not a claim, Eleanor. It's a medical fact. Your son's vasectomy failed. It happens more often than you'd think." Her laugh was cold. "A convenient explanation. Here's what's going to happen. You will accept the divorce settlement as offered, sign the non-disclosure agreement regarding Andrew's medical history, and discreetly handle this situation you've created. In return, I'll ensure you receive a generous one-time payment, enough to relocate somewhere far from Portland and start fresh." The meaning behind her careful phrasing was unmistakable. You're asking me to terminate my pregnancy and disappear. I'm offering you a dignified exit from a situation that could become very unpleasant for everyone involved, Eleanor corrected. Think of it as a business transaction. Clean, simple, private. White-hot anger surged through me. This isn't a business transaction. It's my child, Andrew's child, your grandchild. A paternity test would be required to prove that claim, she said dismissively. And I doubt you're eager to reveal who actually fathered this baby. The offer stands for 48 hours. After that, I'll have no choice but to protect my son and our family's reputation more. Aggressively. The line went dead before I could respond. I sat frozen, the phone still pressed to my ear, as rage and fear battled within me. Eleanor Chen had built her reputation as one of Portland's most formidable businesswomen by eliminating problems efficiently. Now, I was the problem she intended to remove. My hand moved instinctively to my still flat abdomen. "We'll be okay," I whispered, though I had no idea how to make that promise true. "We'll figure this out together." The next morning, I signed the lease on Diane's apartment and accepted her job offer. If Eleanor wanted me to disappear, I would do the opposite. I would put down roots, build a life for myself and my child, and create a foundation too strong for the Chen family to topple. "You look like a woman on a mission," Diane observed as I filled out the employment paperwork. "Something change overnight?" "I got a reminder of exactly why I need to stand on my own 2 feet," I said, signing my name with a flourish. "Plus, I'm pretty sure my mother-in-law just threatened me, so there's that extra motivation." Diane raised an eyebrow. "Want to elaborate?" "On that threat part?" I explained Eleanor's call, watching Diane's expression grow increasingly outraged. "That manipulative—" She cut herself off. "Well, now I'm personally invested in seeing you succeed just to spite that woman. Nobody threatens a pregnant woman on my watch." She tapped the employment contract. "Consider your hours flexible, health insurance covered, and your new mama bear acquired." Over the next 2 weeks, I threw myself into transforming the storage space into a home. Marcus and several other artists from the collective helped move boxes, paint walls, and assemble furniture found at thrift stores and estate sales. What the apartment lacked in luxury, it made up for in character. Exposed brick walls, wooden floors that had been hidden under old carpeting, and windows that filled the space with natural light. Each day, I worked downstairs at Horizon, learning the rhythm of the coffee shop while redesigning menus and creating social media content that showcased Diane's incredible baked goods. In the evenings, I returned to my commissions, finding that the upheaval in my personal life had somehow deepened my artistic voice. The mixed media pieces I created during those first weeks in my new home had an emotional rawness that attracted attention from local galleries. Meanwhile, Andrew's lawyer continued sending increasingly aggressive settlement proposals, all containing the same core demands. My silence regarding Andrew's medical history, my agreement to never seek child support, and my consent to waive any claims to paternity testing. "They're scared," Marcus observed when I showed him the latest letter. "If they weren't worried this baby might be Andrew's, they wouldn't be pushing so hard." "They're also used to getting their way," I replied, sealing the documents in an envelope to return to my lawyer, a former customer of Diane's who had agreed to represent me for a reduced fee. "Eleanor Chen doesn't lose. Ever." "First time for everything," Diane said, refilling my decaf coffee, "including standing up to rich bullies who think their bank accounts put them above basic human decency." As my first trimester progressed, I developed a routine that offered some stability. Mornings in the coffee shop, afternoons working on commissioned art, evenings planning for the baby. I started a memory box, adding ultrasound photos, journal entries, and small mementos that I hoped would someday help my child understand our journey. Then, at 14 weeks, everything changed again. I was restocking the pastry case when a familiar figure stepped up to the counter. Andrew stood rigidly in his tailored suit, looking so out of place in the eclectic coffee shop that it would have been comical under different circumstances. "We need to talk," he said without preamble. "I'm working." I continued arranging muffins, grateful that my loose-fitting Horizon t-shirt concealed my small but distinct baby bump. "It's important." Something in his voice made me look up. The arrogant certainty I'd grown accustomed to seeing in his expression had been replaced by something more complex. Diane appeared at my side, wiping her hands on her apron. "Everything okay here, Becca?" "This is Andrew, my husband." The word felt strange now, a technical truth without emotional reality. Recognition flashed in Diane's eyes. "Take 15, she said to me, then turned to Andrew with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "There's a table in the back corner with some privacy. Don't keep my employee too long. We've got a rush coming after the high school lets out." The protective note in her voice wasn't subtle. Andrew looked momentarily taken aback. He wasn't accustomed to being addressed in that tone, but followed me to the indicated table. "How did you find me?" I asked once we were seated. "Your lawyer provided your work address. Said if I wanted to discuss anything with you directly, I could do it here or not at all." He glanced around the coffee shop. "This is different from what you're used to." "That's the point," I replied. "What do you want, Andrew?" He pulled a folder from his briefcase. "I saw Dr. Kessler last week for a follow-up on the vasectomy." My heart skipped. "And?" "He confirmed what you've been trying to tell me. Spontaneous reconnection of the vas deferens. Apparently, it's rare, but—" He pushed the folder toward me. "The test results show it's possible that I could have fathered a child, that I could be the father of your baby." I stared at him, at the medical report he'd brought, at the conflict evident in his expression. "I've been telling you that for months." "I know." He looked down at his hands. "Mother was convinced you were lying, that you'd been unfaithful. She had people following you, watching your interactions with that artist." "Marcus is a friend," I interrupted. "Nothing more. The fact that you had me followed instead of simply talking to me says everything about what our marriage had become." Andrew had the grace to look ashamed. "I'm not proud of many things I've done recently." He took a deep breath. "I'd like to request a paternity test. If the baby is mine, I want to be involved. I want to provide support. And if tests confirm what I already know, that this is your child, then we should discuss co-parenting arrangements." I studied him carefully. "Does Eleanor know you're here?" His hesitation told me everything. "She believes I'm at a business lunch. So she still wants me to disappear, with or without this baby." Mother's views are complicated, but this is my decision, not hers. He reached across the table, stopping just short of touching my hand. "Becca, if I've been wrong about this, about you, I want to make it right." The sincerity in his voice was familiar, a reminder of the man I'd fallen in love with years ago, before Eleanor's influence had corroded our relationship. For a moment, I allowed myself to imagine reconciliation, co-parenting, a family, somehow preserved despite everything. Then I remembered the coldness in his eyes when he'd accused me of infidelity, the ease with which he'd believed the worst about me, the years of letting his mother undermine me. "I'll agree to the paternity test," I said finally. "Not because I have anything to prove, but because this child deserves to know their father. And because I want it legally documented that your mother's smear campaign against my fertility was a lie." Relief and something like regret flickered across Andrew's face. "I'll have my lawyer send the paperwork. We can use a non-invasive prenatal test, just a blood draw from you." I nodded, suddenly exhausted by the conversation and all its implications. Is that everything? For now. He stood, adjusting his suit jacket with the nervous precision I'd once found endearing. You look well, Becca, despite everything. I am well, I replied honestly. Better than I expected to be. After Andrew left, Diane appeared with a mug of herbal tea and a concerned expression. Want to talk about it? He wants a paternity test. Turns out his vasectomy failed, just like I said it did. And how do you feel about that? I wrapped my hands around the warm mug, vindicated, anxious, confused. I looked up at her. Part of me wants to reject any involvement from him after how quickly he turned on me. But another part thinks, our child deserves a chance to know their father, however complicated that might be. Diane nodded thoughtfully. Just remember, you're in control now. You're building something solid here. She gestured around us. Whatever comes next, you're facing it from a position of strength, not desperation. She was right. In the, month since Andrew had demanded I leave our home, I'd created something new, a community of support, meaningful work, a space that was truly mine. The baby growing inside me wasn't a complication or a scandal. They were the catalyst for the life I was now building, brick by stubborn brick. I reported for my next shift with a lighter heart, knowing that whatever Andrew or Eleanor might do next, they no longer held the power to break me. The paternity test would confirm what I already knew, and then we would move forward, not on the Chen family's terms, but on mine and my child's. 2 weeks later, my lawyer called with the test results. Congratulations, Rebecca. You're officially having Andrew Chen's baby with a 99.9% probability. I could hear the satisfaction in her voice. I've already sent documentation to opposing counsel. Ball's in their court now. It took 3 days for Andrew to reach out again, this time through his lawyer, requesting a meeting to discuss parental rights and responsibilities. The formal language couldn't disguise what was happening. Andrew was making his claim on our child, just as I'd known he would once the truth was confirmed. What I hadn't anticipated was Eleanor Chen appearing at Horizon the very next morning, dressed impeccably, in a designer suit that made her look severely out of place among the coffee shop's casual customers. Mrs. Chen, I said, keeping my voice professional despite the sudden pounding of my heart. What can I get for you today? Her smile was thin. A moment of your time, Rebecca. Privately. Diane, who had developed an almost supernatural sense for when I might need backup, materialized beside me. Everything okay here, Becca? This is Andrew's mother, I explained. She'd like to speak with me. Well, we're pretty busy right now, Diane said, surveying the nearly empty shop with exaggerated concern. But I suppose you could use the office for 5 minutes. Just 5, mind you. Those social media posts won't create themselves. Eleanor's displeasure at being managed was evident, but she followed me to the small office at the back of the coffee shop. Once the door closed behind us, her carefully maintained facade slipped. I underestimated you, she said, the words clearly costing her. A mistake I won't repeat. What do you want, Eleanor? To offer you a final opportunity to be reasonable. She opened her handbag and removed a checkbook. Name your price, Rebecca. For you to walk away, leave Portland, relinquish any claim on the Chen family or name. I stared at her in disbelief. You can't be serious. I'm carrying your grandchild. A child conceived under questionable circumstances, regardless of what some test claims. She began writing on the check. Andrew is heir to the Chen group. He has responsibilities, a position to maintain. This situation would be an ongoing distraction. This situation is your family, I said, anger rising. Your son's child. Your grandchild. Eleanor tore the check from the book and held it out to me. $1 million. Enough to start a comfortable life anywhere else. Far more than you would receive in child support over 18 years. For a moment, I was speechless, staring at the check with its obscene number of zeros. Then, as the full meaning of her offer sank in, clarity came with it. "You want me to sell you my baby," I said slowly. "To erase myself from their life. To let you and Andrew pretend I never existed." "I want to protect my family's legacy," she corrected. Sharply, "Andrew made a mistake getting involved with someone outside our social circle. That doesn't mean his entire future should be derailed by it." Something shifted inside me, a final severing of whatever lingering attachment I might have had to the world I'd once been part of through Andrew. I looked at Eleanor Chen, with her perfect clothes and her checkbook solutions, and felt nothing but pity. "Keep your money," I said quietly. "My child isn't for sale. Neither is my dignity." Eleanor's expression hardened. "You'll regret this. Andrew may be temporarily swayed by sentimentality and guilt, but he will always choose family in the end. Our family, not whatever you're trying to create here." She gestured dismissively at the coffee shop beyond the office door. "That's where you're wrong." I placed a protective hand over my growing belly. "This baby is his family too. And if Andrew chooses to shut us out because you demand it, that will be his loss to live with." I opened the office door. "Your 5 minutes are up, Mrs. Chen. If you'd like to order something, I'll be happy to help you at the counter." She left without another word, her rigid posture and tight jaw the only indications of her fury. As the door closed behind her, Diane appeared with a mug of herbal tea and a questioning look. "She offered me $1 million to disappear with the baby," I said, still processing the encounter. "Damn," Diane whistled. "$1 million would buy a lot of diapers. It would also cost something I'm not willing to sell." Diane wrapped an arm around my shoulders. "And that's why you're going to be an amazing mother, Becca, because you already know what's priceless." The first trimester morning sickness hit me like a tsunami one Tuesday morning as I attempted to frost cupcakes for Horizon's display case. I barely made it to the employee bathroom, clutching the edge of the toilet as my body rejected everything I'd consumed since dawn. Diane found me there, pale and trembling, and wordlessly handed me a damp cloth. "That's it," she declared, helping me to my feet. "You're on register duty until further notice. No more food prep during the morning shift." "I'm fine," I protested weakly. "Just a bad wave today." Diane raised an eyebrow. "I've been where you are, Becca. The smell of food in the morning is torture. We'll adjust your schedule. Work with your body, not against it." The modifications to my routine came naturally after that. Afternoons and evenings in the kitchen when my nausea subsided. Mornings at the register, greeting customers with as much cheer as I could muster, despite the persistent queasiness. Diane installed a small fan behind the counter that blew scents away from me, a gesture so thoughtful it nearly made me cry, an increasingly common occurrence as my hormones fluctuated wildly. Word of my pregnancy spread quickly among Horizon's regular customers. Most were supportive, some quietly judgmental when they noticed my bare ring finger, but all were curious about the woman who had appeared so suddenly in their neighborhood. Coffee shop. "That's quite a bump you're getting there," observed Mrs. Winters, an elderly woman who came every morning for her single espresso, always dressed as though headed to church. "Do you know what you're having yet?" "Not yet," I replied, handing her the tiny cup. "I'll find out next week at my 20-week scan." "A boy," she said with complete confidence. "You're carrying low, and your skin is clear. Classic boy signs." She leaned closer, lowering her voice. "The father in the picture?" Before I could formulate a response that wasn't overly personal, Tanya, our weekend barista and my newfound ally, intervened from the espresso machine. "Becca's got the whole village behind her. Takes more than DNA to make a dad, right?" Mrs. Winters nodded sagely. "My Albert raised 3 children who weren't his by blood. Best father I ever knew." She dropped her usual $5 tip into the jar. "You tell me if you need anything, young lady. I've got enough hand-knitted baby blankets to open a store." These small kindnesses sustained me through the increasingly complicated legal negotiations with Andrew. True to his word, he wanted involvement with the child, our child, but his vision of co-parenting bore the unmistakable influence of Eleanor's manipulation. Each proposal from his lawyers gave him extensive decision-making power while limiting my autonomy as the primary caregiver. "They're testing boundaries," my lawyer explained during one of our meetings in Diane's office after hours. "Seeing how much control you'll surrender." "I don't want to keep Andrew from his child," I said, rubbing my growing belly absently. "But I won't let him dictate our lives either. That's why we counter with our terms. Joint decision-making on major issues, liberal visitation that increases as the child grows, financial support commensurate with his resources." She closed her folder decisively, "and an ironclad provision that prevents his mother from making medical or educational decisions in his absence." I winced. He'll never agree to that last one. Then he reveals his true priorities, doesn't he? My lawyer's expression softened slightly. "Rebecca, you need to prepare yourself. This may get uglier before it resolves." She was right. The next communication from Andrew's legal team included a demand for a court-appointed psychological evaluation, a fishing expedition designed to paint me as emotionally unstable based on my erratic behavior during our separation. Erratic behavior? I repeated incredulously when my lawyer called with the news. I've been working 2 jobs, preparing for a baby, and dealing with his mother's harassment. What exactly is erratic about that? "It's a standard tactic," she assured me. "We'll respond by welcoming the evaluation, as long as it applies equally to Andrew and includes an assessment of undue influence from third parties in his household." The veiled reference to Eleanor's manipulation was clear. The demand for psychological evaluation mysteriously disappeared from subsequent negotiations. As my second trimester progressed, I found unexpected joy in preparing for my child's arrival. The tiny bedroom adjacent to mine in the apartment gradually transformed into a nursery, filled with secondhand furniture that I refinished during quiet evenings. A rocking chair found at an estate sale, a crib donated by one of Diane's relatives, a changing table that Marcus helped me build from repurposed wood. "You've got a real talent for this," Marcus observed one Saturday as we added the finishing touches to a bookshelf made from an old ladder. "Have you thought about expanding your furniture restoration into baby items? There's a huge market for unique nursery pieces." The idea took root immediately. I began photographing my creations and posting them on a dedicated Instagram account. Renewed beginnings, custom nursery furniture. The response was overwhelming. Within weeks, I had commissions for custom pieces from expectant parents who wanted something more personal than mass-produced items. Between my shifts at Horizon, my growing furniture business, and my ongoing legal battle with Andrew, exhaustion became my constant companion. More than once, Diane found me asleep at the workbench I'd set up in the corner of my apartment, sandpaper still in hand. "You're doing too much," she admonished, steering me toward my bed. "The baby needs you rested more than they need another perfectly painted drawer." "I need to be financially secure before they arrive," I argued through a massive yawn. "And I'm actually enjoying the work. It feels healing somehow." "Healing is good. Collapse from exhaustion isn't." She pulled a throw blanket over me as I sank onto the mattress, too tired to resist. "The shop can manage without you tomorrow. Sleep in, work on your commissions at a human pace, and remember that marathon runners pace themselves." I did take the next day off, using the time to attend my 20-week anatomy scan. The technician moved the ultrasound wand across my belly with practiced efficiency, pointing out tiny hands, feet, a perfect spine, and finally confirming what Mrs. Winters had predicted: a boy. "Would you like me to print extra photos?" the technician asked. "For the father, perhaps?" The question caught me off guard. "Yes, I decided after a moment. 3 copies, please. One set I added to my growing memory box. Another I tucked into my purse to show Diane and the Horizon staff. The third set I mailed to Andrew's office with a brief note. Your son, healthy in every way, 20 weeks. I hadn't expected a response, so the text message that arrived later that evening was a surprise. Thank you for the photos. Can we meet to discuss next steps? No lawyers. We arranged to meet at a neutral location, a park near the hospital where I'd had my scan. Andrew was already waiting on a bench when I arrived, his suit jacket abandoned in the unseasonable warmth, shirt sleeves rolled up in a rare display of informality. You look well, he said, as I lowered myself awkwardly beside him, my center of gravity shifting with each passing week. You look tired, I replied honestly. Dark circles shadowed his eyes and tension lines had deepened around his mouth. Work has been demanding. He hesitated. Mother is pushing for expansion into international markets. The hours are brutal. I remember. How many nights had I eaten dinner alone during our marriage, waiting for Andrew to return from meetings that inevitably ran late? How many weekends had been sacrificed to Eleanor's ambitious business plans? An uncomfortable silence stretched between us before Andrew cleared his throat. I've been thinking about names. Family names, specifically. I see. Of course Eleanor would insist on a family name. I braced myself for the suggestion of Andrew's father's name, Henry, or perhaps his grandfather's, Wei. Not Chen family names, Andrew clarified, surprising. Me? Your family. Mitchell names. I stared at him, genuinely shocked. Why? Andrew looked down at his hands. Because I'm trying to do better, to think beyond what's expected. He met my gaze directly. I don't want our son to be a battleground, Becca, or a pawn. He deserves better than that. For the first time since our separation, I glimpsed the man I'd fallen in love with. Thoughtful, quietly determined, capable of standing on his own. Thank you, I said softly. That means more than you know. I've instructed my lawyers to withdraw the more aggressive demands in our custody negotiations. He shifted uncomfortably. Some of those terms were at Mother's insistence. I should have questioned them more thoroughly. Hope flickered cautiously within me. And now? Now I'm asking what you want. What you think is best for our son. The vulnerability in his expression was new, unfamiliar. I want him to have both of us in his life, I said honestly. To know he's loved and wanted by his father. But I also need to protect him from becoming collateral damage in larger Chen family dynamics. Andrew nodded slowly. That's fair. He took a deep breath. I've leased an apartment, a place of my own, separate from Mother's house. The significance of this was enormous. Andrew had moved directly from his parents' home to our marital home, never living independently. For him to establish space apart from Eleanor represented a seismic shift in family dynamics. She can't be pleased about that, I observed. A wry smile crossed his face. She's not. But becoming a father has made me reconsider many things, including boundaries that should have been established long ago. We spent the next hour on that park bench, talking more openly than we had in years. About practical co-parenting arrangements, about Andrew's complicated relationship with his mother, about my growing furniture business and the community I'd found at Horizon. For the first time, it felt like we might forge a path forward based on mutual respect rather than legal mandates. As we prepared to leave, Andrew hesitated. Would it be all right if He gestured toward my rounded belly. I nodded, surprised by the request but willing to bridge this small gap. Andrew placed his hand gently on my stomach, his expression transforming from uncertainty to wonder when the baby kicked firmly against his palm. That's incredible, he whispered. He's strong, I said, already making his presence known. Andrew withdrew his hand reluctantly. Like his mother, he said quietly, stronger than anyone expected. The subtle acknowledgement of my resilience lingered with me long after we parted ways. There was no guarantee that Andrew's newfound independence from Eleanor would last. No certainty that co-parenting would proceed smoothly. But for the first time, I allowed myself to hope that our child might know his father as the man Andrew could be, not the puppet Eleanor had shaped. 2 days later, a delivery arrived at Horizon, a simple wooden box with no note or identification. Inside, nestled in tissue paper, lay a small hand-carved wooden lion, exquisitely detailed and polished to a warm glow. "Secret admirer?" Diane asked, examining the beautiful craftsmanship. "I think it's from Andrew," I said, running my fingers over the smooth curves of the lion's mane. His way of suggesting a name, perhaps. "Leo?" Diane considered this. "Strong name. Means lion. In Latin." I placed the carving on the counter, watching sunlight play across its golden surface. "Leo Mitchell." I tried the name aloud. Not a Chen family name, but not a complete rejection of that heritage either. A fresh start with roots in something enduring. "I like it." That evening, I texted Andrew a photo of the lion carving positioned on the windowsill of the nursery. "Leo Mitchell. Perfect." His response came minutes later. "It suits him." The gesture and our park bench conversation marked a turning point in our negotiations. Andrew's lawyers presented revised terms that were remarkably reasonable. Joint legal custody with primary physical custody to me, generous visitation rights, substantial financial support, and most surprisingly, a clause strictly limiting Eleanor's authority to make decisions on behalf of the child. "He's actually standing up to her," my lawyer remarked, reviewing the documents with unconcealed surprise. "I've negotiated against the Chen legal team before. This is unprecedented." We finalized the agreement 2 weeks before my due date, signing papers in a conference room that felt worlds away from the coffee shop that had become my home base. Andrew maintained a formal demeanor throughout the meeting, but as our lawyers packed away their materials, he lingered. "Mother wants to host a baby shower," he said, clearly uncomfortable with the message he'd been tasked to deliver. "At the house. Family, close friends, some business associates." I couldn't help but laugh. A baby shower? For the child she offered $1 million to make disappear? Andrew winced. She's adjusting to reality, in her own way. "By which you mean she's realized she can't control this situation, so now she's trying to co-opt it?" Essentially, yes. There was unexpected humor in his acknowledgement. "You don't have to accept." "I appreciate the invitation," I said diplomatically, "but I've already had a shower." A simple celebration organized by Diane and Tanya, attended by Horizon regulars and artists from the collective. No extravagant gifts, just practical necessities and handmade treasures infused with genuine care. "Please thank your mother, but tell her I'm focusing on rest in these final weeks." Andrew nodded, seemingly relieved by my refusal. "Can I bring something for the nursery? Something from me, not her." The lion carving was perfect, I assured him. But the nursery could use books, children's classics, the kind we'd want to read to him. The tenderness that flickered across Andrew's face confirmed I'd made the right suggestion. For all his mother's influence, Andrew had treasured books as a child. We'd connected initially over shared literary references at that first charity event, discussing favorite childhood stories long after other guests had departed. "I know just what to get," he said, his expression softening. "Books that stand the test of time." The collection of children's books arrived 3 days later, beautifully illustrated editions of Where the Wild Things Are, Goodnight Moon, The Little Prince, and a dozen others. Tucked inside the velveteen rabbit was a note in Andrew's precise handwriting. For Leo, to begin his library, may he learn early what it means to become real through being loved. The thoughtfulness of the gift moved me to tears, those ever-present pregnancy hormones amplifying emotions I might otherwise have contained. For the first time since our separation, I allowed myself to mourn what might have been if Andrew had found his independence sooner, if Eleanor's influence hadn't corrupted our relationship, if we'd had the chance to build a family without the trauma of betrayal and accusation. My melancholy reflections were interrupted by a sharp, unmistakable pain radiating across my lower back and abdomen. I glanced at the clock, 3:17 a.m., and realized with sudden clarity that Leo had decided to make his entrance 3 weeks ahead of schedule. I called Diane first, having long ago agreed she would drive me to the hospital when the time came. Then, after a moment's hesitation, I texted Andrew. Labor started. Heading to Portland Memorial with Diane. We'll keep you updated. By the time Diane arrived, harried but fully alert despite the hour, my contractions were coming regularly, 5 minutes apart. Cutting it close there, Mitchell, she teased as she helped me to her car. First babies usually take their time. Nothing about this pregnancy has followed the rule book, I replied through gritted teeth as another contraction peaked. Why start now? At the hospital, things progressed with unexpected speed. The doctor barely had time to examine me before declaring I was already 7 centimeters dilated. This baby's in a hurry, she observed. Let's get you settled in a delivery room. Through the haze of intensifying contractions, I was vaguely aware of Diane fielding messages on my phone, updating Marcus and others from my small but devoted circle. At some point, she mentioned that Andrew was in the waiting room. He came? I asked between carefully controlled breaths. Arrived 10 minutes after we did, she confirmed. Asked if he could see you, but said he understands if you'd rather. He wait outside. I considered the complexity of emotions his presence evoked, gratitude for his interest, lingering hurt from his earlier betrayal, cautious hope for what his involvement might mean for Leo. He can come in, I decided, if he wants to. Andrew entered the delivery room tentatively, looking both terrified and determined in rumpled clothes that suggested he'd dressed in haste. I can stay in the waiting room, he offered immediately. I don't want to intrude. Another contraction seized me before I could respond. Without hesitation, Andrew moved to the side of the bed opposite Diane, offering his hand. I gripped it reflexively, squeezing hard as the pain crested and receded. Sorry, I gasped when I could speak again. Don't apologize, he said softly. I'm here if you want me, however you need me. For the next 2 hours, as labor intensified to nearly unbearable levels, Andrew remained steadfast. He didn't flinch when I crushed his fingers during contractions, didn't retreat when I snapped at him during a particularly brutal stretch of transition, didn't waver when the doctor announced it was time to push. You're doing amazingly, he murmured, wiping my forehead with a cool cloth. Almost there, Becca. In that moment, the months of conflict receded. We weren't adversaries negotiating custody terms or ex-spouses navigating a complicated separation. We were just 2 people witnessing the miracle of their child entering the world. Leo Mitchell arrived at 7:48 a.m., announcing his presence with a lusty cry that filled the delivery room. Perfect APGAR scores, the doctor declared, placing his tiny, squirming body on my chest. Congratulations, Mom. He's beautiful. Through tears, I examined our son, the delicate fingers, the shock of dark hair, the determined little chin that resembled Andrew's. Hello, Leo, I whispered. We've been waiting for you. When I glanced up, Andrew's eyes were filled with tears. Thank you, he said, his voice choked with emotion, for letting me be here, for giving us such a perfect son. In that raw, unguarded moment, with Leo's weight warm against my skin, I glimpsed what might be possible. Not a reconciliation of our marriage, but a new kind of partnership centered entirely on the tiny human we'd created together. The peaceful bubble of those first hours was punctured, inevitably, by the arrival of Eleanor Chen. She swept into my hospital room during late afternoon, when Leo was sleeping soundly in the bassinet beside my bed, and Andrew had stepped out to make calls. Rebecca. Her voice was neutral, her expression carefully composed as she approached the bassinet. I see my grandson has arrived. 3 weeks early, I confirmed, watching her closely. But healthy and strong. Eleanor studied Leo's sleeping face, something complicated flickering in her eyes. He favors Andrew as a newborn, the same profile. I remained silent, waiting. This was the closest Eleanor had come to acknowledging that Leo was truly her grandchild, her blood relation, her legacy. I've brought this. She placed a small velvet box on the bedside table. A family tradition. Each Chen firstborn receives a jade pendant for protection and prosperity. The gesture was laden with significance. By offering the pendant, Eleanor was symbolically accepting Leo into the Chen family, despite the circumstances of his birth and my estrangement from Andrew. Thank you, I said carefully. It's a meaningful tradition. Eleanor straightened her already impeccable blazer. My driver has brought the car seat you selected from your registry, the highest safety rating available. Andrew mentioned you plan to leave tomorrow. I blinked in surprise. Yes, that's right. Good. She moved toward the door, then paused. You should know, Rebecca, that while I may have misjudged certain aspects of this situation, my primary concern has always been protecting my family. Leo is your family now, I replied evenly. I hope your protection extends to him, regardless of how you feel about me. Something that might have been respect flickered briefly in Eleanor's expression. We'll see each other soon, I expect. Andrew has informed me of the visitation schedule you've arranged. After she departed, I opened the velvet box. Inside lay an exquisite jade pendant on a delicate gold chain, carved with Chinese characters, and symbols I couldn't read. Despite everything that had transpired between Eleanor and me, I recognized the gift for what it was. Not merely a tradition fulfilled, but a tentative olive branch extended. Andrew returned moments later, looking mildly shell-shocked. I see Mother has been here. She brought the family jade pendant, I said, showing him the box. And apparently a car seat. Andrew ran a hand through his hair. She's trying, in her way. When I told her Leo had arrived early, she actually canceled a business meeting to go shopping for him. He sank into the chair beside my bed. It's not an apology, but it's something. Progress, I agreed cautiously. One small step. As if sensing the conversation about his grandmother, Leo began to stir in his bassinet, little fists waving as he worked his way toward a full-throated cry. Andrew hesitated, then asked, May I? I nodded, watching as he carefully lifted our son, supporting his head with instinctive gentleness. Hey there, little lion, he murmured. I'm your dad. The simple declaration, spoken with such tenderness, cemented the reality of our new dynamic. Whatever had broken between Andrew and me could not be mended, but something new was forming in its place. A partnership based not on romantic love, but on the shared love for the child in his arms. As Leo settled against Andrew's chest, his cries subsiding into contented snuffles, I allowed myself to acknowledge what the past 9 months had taught me. Sometimes, the most devastating loss could lead to unexpected gifts. Sometimes the most painful endings created space for necessary beginnings. And sometimes, the family you build from the ashes of broken dreams is stronger than the one you originally imagined. The journey home from the hospital the next day marked the beginning of our new reality. Diane drove while I sat beside Leo's car seat in the back, watching his sleeping face and marveling at the perfection of his tiny features. You ready for this? Diane asked, glancing at me in the rearview mirror. Not even slightly, I admitted, with a tired laugh. But we'll figure it out together, won't we, Leo? My apartment had been transformed in my absence. Fresh flowers brightened every surface. A handmade banner reading, "Welcome Home, Leo," stretched across the living room. The refrigerator was stocked with prepared meals, each labeled with heating instructions. And positioned prominently on the coffee table was a carved wooden sign that read, "The Mitchells," in elegant lettering. Marcus's handiwork, Diane explained, noting my reaction to the sign. He said every family needs a proper nameplate. The word family caught in my chest, a concept I'd thought shattered beyond repair now reconstituted in this unexpected form. Leo and me, the community at Horizon, Marcus and the Artists Collective, even Andrew finding his way toward fatherhood on new terms. As Diane helped settle us in, showing me the additional supplies that had mysteriously appeared during my hospital stay, I allowed myself to fully embrace the path that had led me here. Not the future I'd once planned, with its conventional security and predictable milestones, but something more hard-won and authentically mine. We've set up a rotation, Diane was saying, pointing to a calendar on the refrigerator. Different. People bringing dinner each night for the first 2 weeks. And Tanya's going to handle your social media accounts for the furniture business until you're ready to dive back in. You didn't have to do all this, I said, emotion thickening my voice. Honey, this is what family does, Diane replied, squeezing my shoulder. Not the family you're born into or marry into necessarily, but the family that shows up when it matters. As if on cue, my phone chimed with a message from Andrew. Hope you and Leo are settling in well. I've arranged for a night nurse to help 3 times a week if you're comfortable with the idea. No pressure. Just want to make sure you get some rest. Another unexpected kindness, another step toward a co-parenting relationship that might actually work. I typed back, that would be wonderful. Thank you. Setting my phone aside, I gazed around the apartment that had become our home. The road ahead wouldn't be easy. There would be sleepless nights and challenging days. Negotiations with Andrew would continue to require careful navigation. Eleanor's acceptance of our situation might prove temporary or conditional. But as I held Leo against my heart, his tiny breaths warm against my neck, I knew with absolute certainty that we would be okay. More than okay. We would thrive in this life we were building together, brick by determined brick. The first 6 weeks of Leo's life passed in a blur of sleepless nights, endless feedings, and moments of overwhelming love intermingled with crushing self-doubt. Despite Diane's rotation of helpers and Andrew's hired night nurse 3 evenings a week, exhaustion became my constant companion. I existed in a twilight state where days bled into nights, and simple tasks like showering felt like monumental achievements. You're doing great, Diane reassured me one morning when she found me crying over a pile of laundry I couldn't seem to fold. Every new mom goes through this. The hormonal crash, the sleep deprivation. It's like hazing for the motherhood club. I can handle the exhaustion, I admitted, wiping my eyes. It's the feeling that I should be managing better. Doing more, getting back to work sooner. Diane gently took the onesie I'd been attempting to fold for 5 straight minutes. Your job right now is keeping that beautiful boy alive and yourself functioning. Everything else can wait. But the financial reality of single motherhood couldn't wait indefinitely. The savings I'd accumulated during pregnancy were dwindling, and while Andrew's support covered Leo's necessities, I was determined to maintain my independence rather than becoming financially reliant on my ex-husband. At 8 weeks postpartum, I brought Leo downstairs to Horizon for the first time, setting up a portable bassinet in Diane's office. Just for a few hours, I explained as I arranged his supplies. I can handle the morning rush on register, maybe work on some designs for the website refresh we talked about. Diane eyed me skeptically. You sure you're ready? Not even slightly, I admitted with a weary smile. But I need to start somewhere. That first morning shift with Leo nearby was a juggling act of epic proportions. He slept peacefully for the first hour, allowing me to process the early coffee orders with reasonable efficiency. Then came the cluster of fussy moments requiring quick breaks to nurse, burp, or simply soothe him back to sleep. The Horizon regulars watched with varying degrees of sympathy, amusement, and in Mrs. Winter's case, unsolicited advice. Babies need routine, she informed me, peering into the bassinet where Leo was finally dozing again. My Albert Jr. slept through the night at 6 weeks because I never deviated from his schedule. Not once. I bit back the retort that threatened to escape my sleep-deprived brain. Leo seems to have his own ideas about scheduling, I said instead, ringing up her espresso. Strong-willed, like his mother. She dropped her usual tip into the jar. Might not be a bad thing in the long run. By the end of that first shift, I was physically drained but mentally reinvigorated. The simple act of adult conversation, of contributing something beyond milk production and diaper changes, had restored a piece of my identity that had been temporarily submerged in the tsunami of new motherhood. You're looking more alive than you have in weeks, Tanya observed as she arrived for the afternoon shift. Even with spit up on your shoulder. I glanced down at the telltale stain and laughed. Occupational hazard. But honestly, it feels good to be back, even just for a few hours. The gradual return to work evolved into a sustainable routine. Mornings at Horizon with Leo, afternoons at home working on furniture commissions while he napped, evenings dedicated solely to motherhood. Andrew's weekend visitations, initially brief and supervised, became longer and more confident as he grew comfortable with infant care. He's actually a natural, I admitted to Diane after watching Andrew competently manage a diaper blowout during a handoff. Who would have thought the man who once sent his custom shirts out for professional laundering would be unfazed by baby poop? Fatherhood changes people, Diane replied wisely. Some rise to it, some run from it. Looks like your ex is a riser. It wasn't always smooth. Andrew's scheduled visitations occasionally conflicted with Eleanor's expectations for his presence at business functions or family events. More than once, he arrived late and flustered, apologizing for his mother's attempts to override our arrangements. She doesn't understand why I can't simply reschedule, he explained after one particularly tense exchange I'd overheard on his phone. The concept of consistent visitation being important for Leo's sense of security is foreign to her. How did your father handle visitation after the divorce? I asked, suddenly curious about the patterns Andrew might unconsciously be repeating. Andrew's expression shuddered. He didn't, really. Business took him overseas. Most of the time. I saw him maybe twice a year for scheduled appearances, graduations, piano recitals. Mother managed everything else. The revelation illuminated so much about Andrew's initial approach to parenthood. The assumption that financial support was sufficient, that actual caregiving could be delegated. It also highlighted how significantly he was deviating from his family's pattern by insisting on regular, hands-on involvement with Leo. You're doing better than he did, I said quietly, handing him Leo's diaper bag. Leo knows you. Recognizes you. That matters. Something complicated flickered across Andrew's face. Gratitude, determination, and perhaps a touch of grief for his own childhood experiences. I'm trying, he said simply. By the time Leo reached 6 months, a fragile equilibrium had established itself. My furniture business had expanded to include commissioned pieces beyond nursery items, providing a steady secondary income. Horizon had adapted to accommodate Leo's presence during my shifts, with regular customers often volunteering to rock his portable seat while I managed the register. Andrew had settled into a predictable visitation schedule, occasionally taking Leo to his apartment overnight as his confidence in his parenting abilities grew. Even Eleanor had found a reluctant place in our arrangement, hosting Sunday afternoon family time at her home. Sessions I initially declined to attend, but gradually accepted for Leo's sake. She actually asked about your furniture designs. Yesterday, Andrew mentioned after one such visit. Saw the photos on my phone when I was showing her Leo's latest milestone pictures? I raised an eyebrow, skeptical. Eleanor Chen is interested in my upcycled furniture? She said, and I quote, Rebecca's aesthetic sense was always her strongest quality. He offered a wry smile. From Mother? That's practically effusive praise. Progress, I suppose, I conceded. The mention of my business triggered a thought I'd been considering for weeks. Speaking of the furniture, I'm thinking of taking a booth at the Portland Makers Market next month. It would be my first real public showcase. Andrew's expression brightened. That's excellent, Becca. Your work deserves wider recognition. The booth fee is steep, and I'd need inventory beyond my commissioned pieces, I continued, thinking. Aloud. Plus childcare during the 3-day event. Let me help, Andrew offered immediately. I can take Leo those days and… He hesitated. If you're comfortable with it, I could assist with the booth fee as an investment in your business, not as personal support. My initial instinct was to refuse, to maintain the careful boundaries I'd established around financial independence. But pragmatism prevailed. This was an opportunity to potentially transform my side business into something more substantial, something that could provide long-term security for Leo and me. As a business investment, I agreed cautiously, with terms, documented. Andrew nodded, respecting my need for clarity. I'll have something drawn up, completely separate from our personal arrangements. The Portland Makers Market proved to be a turning point for renewed beginnings. My booth, strategically positioned near the entrance and professionally staged thanks to advice from Marcus, attracted consistent attention throughout the 3-day event. The unique combination of artistry and functionality in my upcycled pieces resonated with Portland's sustainability-conscious consumers. By the closing hour on Sunday, I had sold nearly my entire inventory, collected contact information from 3 boutique owners interested in carrying my smaller items, and secured commissions for custom pieces that would keep me busy for months. "You've found your niche," commented a silver-haired woman who had returned to my booth several times over the weekend. She handed me a business card embossed with Westmoreland Interiors in elegant script. My clients are constantly seeking unique statement pieces with character. Call me when you're ready to discuss a potential partnership. I stared at the card long after she departed, recognizing the name of one of Portland's most exclusive interior design firms. The kind that had decorated homes like the one I'd shared with Andrew, where clients thought nothing of spending 5 figures on a single piece of furniture. Eleanor arrived unexpectedly as I was packing up the few remaining items. She looked out of place among the artisans and craft vendors in her tailored pantsuit and pearls, but she surveyed my nearly empty booth with unmistakable approval. Andrew mentioned your weekend plans, she explained, touching a hand-carved wooden tray with tentative appreciation. I see it was successful. Beyond my expectations, I admitted, still somewhat wary of her sudden interest. Eleanor nodded briskly. Quality craftsmanship speaks for itself. You found an intersection between artistic expression and practical application. She straightened her already impeccable posture. I've come to collect you, actually. Andrew thought you might join us for dinner after your long weekend. Leo has been quite vocal about missing his mother. The invitation caught me off guard. Though our co-parenting relationship had gradually warmed, we still maintained separate social spheres. Family dinners had not been part of our evolving arrangement. I'm not exactly dressed for whatever restaurant you've probably booked, I said, gesturing to my paint-splattered jeans and comfortable sweater. We're eating at the house, Eleanor replied. Nothing formal, just family. The word family carried an uncharacteristic uncertainty, as if she was testing the concept herself. Curiosity and exhaustion won out over caution. "Let me finish packing up the van Marcus loaned me. I can follow you there." "Nonsense. My driver can take your remaining items wherever they need to go." Eleanor's tone had returned to its usual, crisp efficiency. "The van's owner can collect it tomorrow, I assume?" Before I could formulate an argument, Eleanor had already summoned her driver and was issuing instructions for the careful transport of my remaining furniture pieces. The seamless assumption of control was so familiar, the same approach that had often steamrolled my preferences during my marriage to Andrew, that I nearly refused on principle. Then I caught something unexpected in Eleanor's expression as she examined a small carved box I'd finished just before the market, a trace of genuine admiration. "This piece is particularly striking," she observed. "The inlay pattern is reminiscent of traditional Chinese motifs, but with a contemporary execution." "It was inspired by a textile pattern I saw at the Asian Art Museum," I explained, surprised by her accurate assessment. "I wanted to honor the traditional design principles while creating something that fits in modern spaces." Eleanor nodded thoughtfully. "A respectful adaptation rather than appropriation. Thoughtfully done." She carefully placed the box into the courier bag her driver held open. "Shall we? Andrew has already texted twice asking about our arrival time." The drive to Eleanor's West Hills mansion was less uncomfortable than I'd anticipated. She inquired about the business contacts I'd made at the market, offering occasional insights about Portland's interior design community that were actually useful. By the time we arrived at the imposing gates that had once intimidated me as a new daughter-in-law, I felt cautiously optimistic about the evening ahead. Andrew greeted us at the door, Leo perched comfortably on his hip. My son's face lit up at the sight of me, chubby arms reaching out as he babbled excitedly. The pang of having been separated from him for 3 days softened as I gathered him, close, inhaling his familiar baby scent. "He's been showing off his new skill," Andrew said, leading us toward the informal family room rather than the formal dining room we'd always used during my marriage. "Watch this." He placed Leo on a blanket spread across the plush carpet, positioning him on all fours. With determined concentration, Leo rocked back and forth before lunging forward in an awkward crawling motion that carried him several inches closer to a colorful toy. "When did this start?" I asked, delighted and a little heartbroken to have missed the milestone. "Yesterday afternoon," Andrew replied, his pride evident. "I've been sending you videos. Didn't you get them?" "Reception at the convention center was terrible," I explained, kneeling to encourage Leo's efforts. "I'll watch them tonight." Dinner proved to be surprisingly relaxed, a casual meal served. Family style in the sunroom overlooking Eleanor's meticulously maintained garden. Andrew had clearly orchestrated the evening, from the menu featuring my favorite pasta dish to the comfortable high chair positioned between our seats. As Eleanor poured wine, I noticed subtle changes throughout the house. Family photographs now included several framed pictures of Leo. A colorful playmat occupied one corner of the sunroom. A cabinet that had once displayed priceless jade figurines now contained baby-friendly toys. "The house has adapted," I observed quietly to Andrew as Eleanor momentarily stepped away to instruct the housekeeper about dessert. Andrew followed my gaze to the baby-proofed coffee table edges and nodded. "Mother was resistant at first. Suggested we simply restrict Leo to certain appropriate areas during visits." His smile held genuine amusement. Then he started showing mobility during a business meeting she insisted on holding here. Crawled straight for her Ming Dynasty vase collection. Childproofing was installed the next day. I couldn't help laughing at the image. Smart woman, your mother, knows when to make strategic concessions. "She's making more of those lately," Andrew said thoughtfully. "I think watching you build something meaningful from scratch, your business, your independence, has earned her respect, however reluctantly given." Eleanor returned before I could respond, carrying a small gift bag that she placed beside my plate. "A small token," she said, resuming her seat. "For your new business endeavor." Inside the bag, nestled in tissue paper, I found an antique carved wooden stamp bearing the Chinese characters for renewed beginnings, alongside an ink pad in a rich crimson hue. "For your maker's mark," Eleanor explained. "Every serious artisan should have one. Andrew mentioned the name of your business, and I had this commissioned." The thoughtfulness of the gift left me momentarily speechless. Not only had Eleanor acknowledged my furniture business as legitimate, but she had also connected it to Chinese artisan traditions, a subtle incorporation of Chen family heritage into my independent venture. "This is unexpected," I finally managed. "Thank you." Eleanor nodded briskly, clearly uncomfortable with the sentiment underlying the exchange. Practical brand recognition, nothing more. But her careful avoidance of eye contact suggested otherwise. This wasn't merely a business accessory, it was a tentative olive branch, an acknowledgement that while I might no longer be a Chen by marriage, Leo represented a permanent connection between our worlds. After dinner, as Leo began showing signs of overtiredness, I prepared to leave. Andrew walked me to the car, carrying Leo's diaper bag while I held our increasingly fussy son. "This was nice," he said as I secured Leo into his car seat. "Different, but nice." "It was," I agreed, surprised by how genuinely I meant it. "Your mother is making an effort." Andrew leaned against the car door, his expression thoughtful. "She's realizing that driving you away means potentially losing access to Leo as he grows up. Self-interest is a powerful motivator for change." Cynical, but probably accurate. I smiled to soften the observation. "Not entirely self-interest, though," Andrew amended. "She mentioned your booth today. How impressed she was by what you've built independently." He hesitated. "That's high praise from Eleanor Chen." I noticed. I closed the car door gently to avoid waking Leo, who had finally succumbed to sleep. "This doesn't fix everything. You know, one pleasant dinner doesn't erase the past." "I know," Andrew agreed, "but maybe it's a starting point for something healthier going forward. For Leo's sake, if nothing else." As I drove home through Portland's evening traffic, I reflected on the subtle shift that had occurred. The family dynamic that had once felt like a battlefield now held the possibility of becoming something more functional. Not perfect, certainly not the conventional unit I'd once envisioned, but perhaps something that could provide Leo with relationships on both sides of his heritage without constant tension and resentment. The months that followed brought steady growth, both for Leo and for my fledgling business. The connection with Westmoreland Interiors resulted in regular commissions for high-end clients, allowing me to scale back my hours at Horizon and focus more on furniture creation. I maintained my apartment above the coffee shop, converting a portion of the living space into a design studio while transforming the building's unused storage shed into a workshop. Leo thrived under the shared care arrangement, developing a secure attachment to both Andrew and me despite our separate households. By his first birthday, he was toddling confidently between us, his vocabulary expanding to include approximations of mama, dada, and to Eleanor's poorly concealed delight, ai nai, the Chinese term for paternal grandmother that Andrew had been teaching him. The birthday celebration itself represented how far we'd come in rebuilding after the initial devastation of separation. Held in the courtyard garden behind Horizon, it brought together the seemingly disparate elements of Leo's life. Diane and the coffee shop staff, Marcus and the artists' collective, Andrew and a carefully restrained Eleanor, even a few of my new clients who had become friends. "Quite the village you've assembled," Diane observed as we watched Leo being entertained by one of Marcus's artist friends who moonlighted as a children's performer. "Not exactly the traditional family model, but it works." "It's working better than I could have imagined," I admitted, watching as Andrew patiently helped Leo unwrap a gift while Eleanor hovered nearby, unusually relaxed in casual slacks rather than her customary formal attire. After the cake had been served and the presents opened, Andrew approached with a small envelope. "This isn't exactly a birthday gift for Leo," he explained. "More of a recognition of this unconventional milestone we've reached as co-parents." Inside the envelope, I found a deed transferring partial ownership of a small commercial property in southeast Portland to my name. "What is this?" I asked, confused by the unexpected document. "It's a workshop space," Andrew explained. "The building came up in a portfolio of properties the Chen Group acquired last quarter. It has living quarters upstairs, studio space, and a proper workshop with ventilation systems already installed." He hesitated. "I thought it might be suitable for renewed beginnings to expand. The apartment above is larger than your current space. 2 bedrooms, a proper office area." I stared at the deed, emotions conflicting inside me. "Andrew, I can't accept this. It's too much." "It's not a gift," he clarified quickly. "It's structured as a business investment with very favorable terms. You'll gain equity with each payment, which will be significantly less than your current combined rent for apartment and workshop space." He glanced toward Leo, who was contentedly smashing cake into his high-chair tray. "I also thought Leo might appreciate having his own bedroom as he gets older." The practical benefits were undeniable, yet I hesitated. I've worked hard to maintain my independence, to build something that's entirely mine. "I know," Andrew said quietly. "That's why the deed is structured as it is. This isn't charity or an attempt to control your future. It's recognition that your business has genuine potential for growth. The Chen Group makes property investments regularly. Consider this one based on merit rather than personal connection." I studied his expression, searching for hidden motives but finding only sincerity. "I'll need my lawyer to review everything," I said finally. "And I'll want market rate terms, not favors." "Of course." Andrew's relief was evident. "I wouldn't have expected anything less." Eleanor approached as Andrew stepped away to help Leo with another gift. She eyed the deed still in my hand with knowing assessment. "Andrew mentioned his proposal," she said. "I assume you're exercising appropriate caution." "Wouldn't you?" A hint of approval flickered across her features. "Indeed. However, I reviewed the property myself before he proceeded. The location is excellent for your market demographic, and the zoning permits both retail and manufacturing uses." She straightened an invisible wrinkle from her linen pants. "From a purely business perspective, it's a sound opportunity." Coming from Eleanor Chen, this constituted enthusiastic endorsement. "I'm considering it," I conceded. "Provided the terms are truly equitable." "They are," she assured me with characteristic confidence. "I insisted upon it. Anything else would undermine the independence you've worked to establish." She glanced toward Leo, who was now attempting to feed cake to his stuffed lion. "He needs a mother he can admire for her strength, not pity for her dependence." The unexpected alignment with my own thinking left me momentarily speechless. Eleanor Chen, who had once orchestrated a campaign to discredit my fertility and later attempted to buy my silence and disappearance, was now advocating for the preservation of my independence. "That's surprisingly insightful," I managed. "I am a businesswoman first, Rebecca," she replied crisply. "Sentiment clouds judgment. You've proven yourself capable and determined. Those qualities deserve respect, regardless of our past differences." With that remarkably direct acknowledgement, she moved away to join Andrew and Leo, leaving me to process this latest evolution in our complex relationship. 2 months later, after thorough legal review and negotiations that Eleanor herself described as admirably tenacious, I signed the final paperwork for the workshop property. The space offered everything Andrew had promised: ample workshop facilities, a light-filled studio for design work, and a comfortable 2-bedroom apartment with a small rooftop garden. Moving day brought another surprise. Eleanor arrived with a team of workers who efficiently transported our belongings while she supervised the placement of a housewarming gift, a hand-woven rug for Leo's new bedroom featuring a pattern of lions and stars. "It's custom-made," she explained, as the workers positioned it precisely in the center of the room. "Designed to coordinate with your aesthetic while incorporating elements Leo enjoys." The thoughtfulness of the gift perfectly aligned with my design sensibilities while celebrating Leo's current obsessions, demonstrated an attention to detail I wouldn't have expected from my former mother-in-law. "Thank you," I said, genuinely touched. "It's perfect for the space." Eleanor nodded briskly. "I've taken the liberty of arranging a small open house next month. Professional contacts who might appreciate your work. Obviously, you may decline if it conflicts with your schedule." The offer, equal parts presumptuous and potentially valuable, typified Eleanor's evolving approach. Still controlling, still orchestrating from behind the scenes, but now directing her considerable influence toward supporting my business rather than undermining my place in her son's life. "I'll check my calendar," I replied, accepting both the gesture and its limitations. "Leo has a pediatrician appointment that week." "Already noted," Eleanor said smoothly. "Andrew mentioned it. The event is scheduled for the following evening." She glanced around the half-unpacked apartment with assessing eyes. "You've created something commendable here, Rebecca, from rather inauspicious beginnings." Coming from Eleanor Chen, this constituted effusive praise. I accepted it with the grace it deserved, recognizing that we had both traveled considerable distance from our positions as adversaries. As she prepared to leave, Eleanor paused at the door. "Leo asks for you, you know, during his overnight visits. Andrew says he keeps a photograph of you beside his crib." Her expression softened fractionally. "That speaks to the security you've provided him despite the circumstances." "He asks for Nai too," I offered in return. "Shows me the jade pendant whenever he wears it home." A rare smile briefly transformed Eleanor's typically stern features. Children have a remarkable capacity for embracing complexity. Perhaps we adults would do well to learn from them. With that philosophical parting, she swept out, leaving me to reflect on the unexpected journey that had brought us to this point of cautious mutual respect, a journey that had begun with her destructive lies about my fertility and evolved into something I could never have anticipated during those dark days after my separation from Andrew. That evening, as I tucked Leo into his new bedroom beneath a mobile of stars I'd crafted from reclaimed wood, I allowed myself to acknowledge how completely my life had transformed in just 18 months. From devastating loss had come unexpected growth. From betrayal had emerged new kinds of trust. From the ashes of one dream, I had built something stronger, more authentic, and entirely my own. "What do you think of your new room, little lion?" I asked as Leo's eyelids grew heavy. "Home," he murmured sleepily, one hand clutching his stuffed lion while the other patted my cheek. "Mama, home." Simple words that contained profound truth. We had found our way home, not to the place or life I had once expected, but to something built with greater intention and resilience. As I dimmed the lights and moved quietly toward the door, I caught sight of my reflection in the hallway mirror. I barely recognized the woman who gazed back at me. Stronger, more confident, tempered by hardship, but not diminished by it. The reflection of someone who had discovered that sometimes the most beautiful creations emerge from what appears irreparably broken. 3 years passed in a rhythm of growth and change. Leo transformed from a toddler into a preschooler, his personality emerging with each passing month, stubborn and creative like me, analytical and observant like Andrew. Renewed Beginnings evolved from a one-woman operation into a small but thriving business with 2 part-time assistants and a waitlist for custom commissions. The open house Eleanor had arranged shortly after our move had indeed connected me with valuable clients, launching Renewed Beginnings into Portland's high-end design world. My signature style, blending reclaimed materials with contemporary, aesthetics and occasional subtle nods to Chinese design elements, had found an enthusiastic market among environmentally conscious professionals with disposable income. Ms. Mitchell? My newest assistant, Zoe, poked her head into the design studio where I was sketching concepts for a dining set commissioned by a tech executive from Seattle. The preschool called. Leo's running a fever, and they'd like someone to pick him up. I glanced at my watch, mentally calculating the afternoon schedule. I had a client meeting in 40 minutes that couldn't be easily rescheduled. The woman was flying back to San Francisco tomorrow. "Let me try Andrew," I said, reaching for my phone. This was the reality of co-parenting, a constant negotiation of schedules and responsibilities. The call went straight to voicemail. He must be in court. Andrew had recently made partner at his law firm, specializing in international business law. I hesitated briefly before dialing Eleanor's number. Over the past 3 years, she had gradually assumed a more prominent role in Leo's life, often filling childcare gaps when neither Andrew nor I could adjust our work commitments. It was an arrangement that still occasionally made me uneasy, but had proven surprisingly functional. "Eleanor Chen," she answered crisply. "Eleanor, it's Rebecca. Leo's running a fever at preschool, and Andrew's unavailable. I have a client meeting." "I can't reschedule. What time does he need to be collected?" she interrupted efficiently. "As soon as possible. They said it's not dangerously high, but school policy requires—" "I'll handle it," Eleanor stated. "I can reschedule my 2 o'clock. Leo can rest at my house until you or Andrew are available." "Thank you," I said, relief mingling with the familiar twinge of complicated feelings that Eleanor's involvement always evoked. "I'll text you my authorization for pickup. They'll want to see ID." "Already on file," Eleanor responded. "I added myself to the approved pickup list last month, during that conference you attended in Chicago." I paused, momentarily taken aback by this unilateral decision, then reminded myself that it had proven useful in exactly this type of situation. The complex dance of co-parenting with Andrew had gradually expanded to include Eleanor, not as the controlling matriarch she'd once been, but as a pragmatic third participant in Leo's care. "I'll come by after my meeting," I said, "around 4:30. "No need to rush," Eleanor replied. "I've cleared my schedule for the remainder of the day. Leo can stay for dinner if that would be helpful." The offer was tempting. My afternoon would be less stressful without the pressure of rushing to Eleanor's immediately after my client meeting. "That would be great, actually. Thank you." "Of course," she said, her tone matter-of-fact rather than warm. Even after years of détente, Eleanor maintained a certain emotional distance. "I'll text you updates on his temperature." When I arrived at Eleanor's house that evening, I found a scene I would have considered impossible 4 years earlier. Leo was curled on the sofa in what had once been Eleanor's formal living room, now transformed into a family space. He was wrapped in a soft blanket, watching a nature documentary while Eleanor sat nearby reviewing business documents, one hand absently stroking his hair. "Mama!" Leo spotted me first, his usual exuberance dimmed by illness but his smile bright. "Nai made special soup and read 3 stories." "Did she?" I smiled, kneeling to feel his forehead. Still warm, but not alarmingly so. "Sounds like you've been well taken care of." "The fever peaked at 101. 3 around 3, Eleanor reported, setting aside her papers. 102 at last check. I've been documenting the readings and medication timing." She handed me a notepad with her precise handwriting detailing Leo's temperature readings and when she'd administered children's ibuprofen. The level of detailed care didn't surprise me. Eleanor approached grandparenting with the same meticulous attention she gave to business acquisitions. What had changed over the years was the underlying emotion. A genuine concern for Leo's well-being had gradually replaced her initial interest in him as a Chen heir. "I've prepared a container of the congee he ate for dinner," she continued, rising from her seat. It's an old family recipe my grandmother made whenever Andrew was ill as a child. Easily digestible, but nourishing. That's very thoughtful, I said, helping Leo gather the toys and books that had migrated from Eleanor's carefully maintained grandchild area to the sofa during his stay. Did you call Andrew? He telephoned after his court appearance, Eleanor confirmed. He's planning to take tomorrow off if Leo is still unwell. The ease of this three-way parenting arrangement had evolved so gradually that sometimes its strangeness caught me off guard. My former mother-in-law, who had once spread lies about my fertility to protect her family's reputation, was now an ally in raising her grandchild, sharing family recipes and covering childcare gaps. Say thank you to Nai, I reminded Leo as I helped him into his jacket. Leo wrapped his arms around Eleanor's legs in an affectionate hug. Thank you for the special soup and taking care of me. Eleanor's usually composed expression softened as she bent to return his embrace. You rest well, little one. Perhaps you'll feel better tomorrow. As I drove home with a drowsy Leo in the back seat, I reflected on how thoroughly my life had transformed. The workshop and apartment had become a true home, filled with evidence of both my thriving business and Leo's expanding world. The wounds that had once seemed impossible to heal had gradually scarred over, leaving me stronger in the broken places. Mama, Leo's voice drifted from the back seat. Why doesn't Daddy live with us? The question, though not entirely unexpected, from a perceptive 4-year-old, still caught me by surprise. Well, sweetie, sometimes grown-ups can care about each other but still need to live in separate homes. Like Tyler's parents, he said, referencing a friend from preschool whose parents had recently separated. Something like that, I agreed, carefully navigating both the evening traffic and this delicate conversation. But just because Daddy and I live in different houses doesn't mean we don't both love you very, very much. I know that, Leo said, with the matter-of-fact confidence of a child who had never questioned his parents' love. But Tyler's daddy only comes on weekends. My daddy comes lots of times, and sometimes I go to his house, and sometimes we all have dinner together. That's right, I confirmed, relieved by his positive framing. Every family is a little different. Ours includes me and Daddy and Nai, all working together to take care of you, even though we live in different houses. Leo considered this for a moment. And Diane and Marcus and Tanya, he added, naming the extended network of pseudo-family, members who had been part of his life since infancy. Yes, them too, I said, smiling at his inclusive understanding of family. We have a pretty amazing group of people who care about us, don't we? Uh-huh. His voice was growing drowsy again. I like our family even if it's different. I like our family too, I said softly, catching his eyes drifting closed in the rearview mirror. Very much. The next morning, Leo's fever had broken, but I kept him home from preschool as a precaution. I rearranged my schedule to work from the apartment, setting him up with quiet activities while I reviewed design proposals at the kitchen table. Around noon, Andrew stopped by with soup from Leo's favorite restaurant and a new picture book about lions. You didn't need to take the whole day off, I said as we watched Leo napping on the sofa, the new book clutched to his chest. His fever broke overnight. I wanted to, Andrew replied, his expression softening as he regarded our sleeping son. Court preparation can wait. In the 4 years since our separation, Andrew had undergone a transformation almost as significant as my own. The ambitious lawyer who had once prioritized his career and his mother's approval above all else had evolved into a man who would rearrange his professional schedule for a mildly ill child. The change wasn't sudden but incremental, small decisions, that gradually formed a new pattern. He asked about our living arrangements yesterday, I mentioned quietly. Wanted to know why you don't live with us. Andrew's expression registered surprise followed by thoughtful consideration. What did you tell him? The simplified version, that grown-ups can care about each other but still need separate homes. How did he take it? Better than I expected, I admitted. He actually seems pretty content with our arrangement, especially compared to classmates with more traditionally separated parents. He sees our situation as having more adults who are consistently involved in his life, not fewer. Andrew nodded, slowly. Children adapt to what's normal for them, and we've managed to make this work without the animosity that typically accompanies divorce. The observation was accurate but incomplete. What Andrew didn't articulate was how hard we'd both worked to reach this point of functional co-parenting. The journey from bitter separation to effective partnership had required continuous effort, especially in the early days when wounds were still raw and trust was fragile. We got lucky, I said, acknowledging what remained unspoken between us. Finding our way to this arrangement hasn't been easy, but it's working for Leo. That's what matters. Andrew met my gaze with unexpected warmth. Not just luck, Becca. Determination. Especially yours. He glanced toward Leo, still peacefully sleeping. I'll never be able to fully make amends for how things began between us, but I'm grateful. We've found this path forward. The sincere acknowledgement of our difficult history caught me off guard. Andrew and I had tacitly agreed years ago to focus on the present and future rather than relitigating the painful past. This rare reference to the circumstances of our separation and his role in it felt significant. We're all doing our best, I said simply, even your mother, in her own Eleanor Chen way. Andrew's laugh held genuine amusement. Mothers, evolution has been unexpected, hasn't it? From trying to erase you from the family narrative to arranging playdates with her society friends' grandchildren. Don't forget the Chinese language lessons, I added, recalling how Eleanor had begun teaching Leo simple Mandarin phrases during his visits. Though I think she's secretly disappointed by my insistence on him taking Spanish at preschool, too. Multilingual education is the Chen standard, Andrew said, perfectly mimicking his mother's precise diction. Global competitiveness begins in childhood. We both laughed at the accurate impression, the moment of shared humor highlighting how far we'd come from adversaries to something approaching friends, not the relationship either of us had envisioned when we'd exchanged vows years earlier, but one that had evolved organically from the broken pieces of our former life. Leo stirred on the sofa, interrupting our conversation. "Daddy?" he mumbled, sleepily. "Did you bring the soup with the star noodles?" "I sure did, buddy," Andrew replied, moving to sit beside him. "Feeling better?" As they chatted about soup preferences and the new Lion book, I excused myself to check business emails that had accumulated during my morning away from the studio. In my home office, I found a message from a major national home design magazine, requesting an interview about renewed beginnings and my uniquely sustainable approach to luxury furniture. The opportunity represented exactly the kind of national exposure that could elevate my business to the next level. With trembling fingers, I typed an enthusiastic acceptance, suggesting several dates for the interview and photo shoot. Only after sending the response did I allow myself to fully process what this meant. Validation of my work on a scale I'd hardly dared to imagine when I'd started refinishing secondhand furniture in Marcus's studio 4 years ago. When I returned to the living room, Andrew was helping Leo set up a simple board game on the coffee table. "Everything okay?" he asked, noting my expression. "More than okay," I replied, still processing the news. Home and Heritage magazine wants to feature renewed beginnings in their Artisans to Watch section. Andrew's face lit up with genuine pleasure at my success. "Becca, that's fantastic. It's a national publication, isn't it?" "With a digital reach of over 3 million, I confirmed, the number still seeming unreal. They want to do a photo shoot here in the workshop and interview me about the business philosophy." "We need to celebrate," Andrew declared. "Leo, how would you feel about having dinner at Mama's favorite restaurant once you're feeling better?" "The one with the fancy bread?" Leo asked enthusiastically. "Can Nai come too?" Andrew glanced at me, eyebrows raised in question. I nodded, recognizing the significance of the moment. What had once been a nuclear family had expanded and reconfigured into something more complex but no less valid. A network of connections centered around the child we all loved. "I'll call Mother," Andrew said, reaching for his phone. "She'll want to hear your news anyway. She's been following your business progress more closely than she'll admit." The celebration dinner took place the following weekend at Portello, a farm-to-table Italian restaurant that had become a favorite for family occasions. Eleanor arrived precisely on time, impeccably dressed as always, but with a relaxed demeanor. That would have been unimaginable years earlier. "The home and heritage feature is significant," she observed after congratulating me on the opportunity. "Their editorial director sits on several design industry boards. The exposure could open international markets for your work. I'm just hoping to connect with more clients who appreciate the sustainability aspect," I said, still adjusting to Eleanor's business-minded approach to my artistic pursuits. "The reclaimed materials story resonates with people." "Precisely why it will translate well to European markets," Eleanor nodded decisively. "Particularly Scandinavia. We should discuss export logistics if interest develops." Andrew caught my eye across the table, his expression amused at his mother's immediate pivot to global expansion plans. Some aspects of Eleanor Chen remained utterly consistent, regardless of how our family dynamics had evolved. Leo, more interested in the restaurant's fresh breadsticks than business discussions, interrupted with a question about whether he could order spaghetti with meatballs, like last time. The conversation shifted naturally to his preferences, then to his recent preschool art project, and finally to the summer program options Andrew and I had been researching. "The Portland Arts Academy has an excellent curriculum for Leo's age group," Eleanor commented, surprising me with her awareness of our ongoing discussions. "Their student-to-teacher ratio is superior to the community center program." "It's also 3 times the cost," I pointed out, though I'd been impressed by the Academy's offerings during our tour. "And the community center includes outdoor activities that the arts program doesn't." "Perhaps a combination of both," Andrew suggested, mediating as he often did between Eleanor's premium preferences and my more practical considerations. "The arts program in the mornings? Community center in the afternoons?" The collaborative problem-solving continued throughout dinner, the 3 adults in Leo's life working through logistical challenges and weighing options with surprising harmony. By dessert, we had outlined a summer schedule that balanced enrichment activities with simple playtime, accommodated our various work commitments, and remained within the budget constraints I insisted upon maintaining despite Andrew's offers, to cover additional expenses. "This is nice," Andrew observed quietly as Eleanor took Leo to examine the restaurant's small fountain in the courtyard after dinner. "The 4 of us, figuring things out together." "It is," I agreed, watching Eleanor point out the different coins in the fountain water to an attentive Leo. "Still surreal sometimes, but nice." "Do you ever wonder?" Andrew began, then hesitated. "Never mind." "What?" I prompted, curious about his uncharacteristic reluctance. Andrew's expression turned reflective. "Do you ever wonder how things might have been different? If Mother hadn't interfered, if I'd been honest about the vasectomy, if we'd handled everything differently from the beginning?" The question pierced through the comfortable reality we'd constructed, reminding me of the painful foundation upon which our current arrangement was built. "Sometimes," I admitted. "But then I look at what we've created from that difficult start, and it's hard to wish for a different path." Andrew nodded slowly. "I've been thinking about that lately. How sometimes the worst moments in our lives lead to growth that wouldn't have happened otherwise." He glanced toward Eleanor and Leo, now returning to our table. "I'm not sure I would have ever established proper boundaries with Mother if everything hadn't fallen apart the way it did." The insight was profound coming from Andrew, who had rarely acknowledged the unhealthy dynamics that had contributed to our marriage's dissolution. And I might never have discovered what I was truly capable of building on my own, I added. A comfortable silence settled between us as Leo climbed back into his chair, chattering excitedly about the fountain's mechanical workings that Eleanor had explained in detail. The conversation shifted naturally to Leo's recent fascination with how things worked, a trait Andrew claimed came from the Chen side of the family, while I maintained it reflected my furniture-making interests. The evening concluded with plans for Leo to spend the following weekend at Andrew's apartment, where they would continue work on the model airplane they'd been constructing together. Eleanor offered to take Leo for his Monday evening art class, which would allow me to meet with potential new suppliers for the workshop. As we prepared to part ways in the restaurant parking lot, Leo insisted on hugs from everyone, a ritual he'd established for family gatherings. Eleanor bent to receive her hug with the careful dignity that characterized even her most affectionate moments, while Andrew lifted Leo for a playful spin that produced delighted giggles. "I'll see you Friday for the handoff," Andrew confirmed, as he helped Leo into my car. "Good luck with the magazine interview preparations." "And do send me the interviewer's credentials beforehand," Eleanor added, ever practical. "I have contacts at the publication who can ensure you're working with someone reputable." I smiled at her characteristic blend of helpfulness and control. "I'll forward the details tomorrow," I promised, knowing that Eleanor's network might indeed prove useful in maximizing the opportunity. As I drove home with a sleepy Leo in the back seat, I reflected on the strange alchemy that had transformed bitter adversaries into functional partners. The journey hadn't been linear or simple, but it had brought us to a place where Leo could grow surrounded by adults who set aside past grievances for his benefit. The magazine feature exceeded all expectations. The photographer captured not only my furniture pieces but the workshop itself, the organized chaos of creation, the wall of salvaged materials waiting for transformation, the sketches and mood boards that documented my design process. The interview delved deep into the philosophy behind renewed beginnings, exploring how personal reinvention had influenced my approach to giving discarded objects new life and purpose. There's something powerful about recognizing the beauty in what others have thrown away, I explained to the reporter as we walked through my collection of materials. These pieces have history, character, stories embedded in their grain. My job is to honor that history while creating something that belongs in the present. When the article was published 3 months later, orders flooded in from across the country. My website crashed twice before Zoe's partner, a web developer, implemented upgrades to handle the increased traffic. I hired 2 additional assistants, expanded workshop hours, and still found myself with a wait list that stretched 6 months for custom pieces. The success brought both opportunities and challenges. Larger retailers approached with licensing offers that would have put my designs into mass production, a prospect that conflicted with my commitment to handcrafted, sustainable practices. Competitors began producing inspired by pieces that mimicked my aesthetic without the careful material sourcing or quality craftsmanship. "You need trademark protection," Eleanor declared during one of our now regular family dinners, "and a more robust legal framework for the business entity. The sole proprietorship structure is insufficient given your current market position." For once, Andrew aligned completely with his mother's assessment. "She's right, Becca. The business has outgrown its original structure. You should consider incorporation, especially with the potential liability issues as you hire more employees." Their concern, while business-focused, reflected genuine support for the enterprise I'd built. By dessert, Eleanor had arranged a consultation with a business attorney specializing in creative industries, and Andrew had offered to review any contracts before I signed them. The evolution of renewed beginnings from personal healing project to legitimate business enterprise paralleled the evolution of our unique family structure. As Leo approached his 5th birthday, the awkwardness, that had once characterized our interactions had given way to a comfortable rhythm of shared responsibilities and mutual respect. Ms. Mitchell? Zoe knocked on my office door one afternoon as I was reviewing material samples for a commissioned conference table. There's someone here to see you. She doesn't have an appointment. I glanced at my calendar, already packed with meetings and design reviews. Did she say what it's regarding? She said to tell you she's from Architectural Harmony magazine. They're doing a follow-up piece on artisans featured in competing publications, and she was hoping for a brief tour. The unexpected press opportunity was tempting, but something about the unscheduled visit triggered my caution. After years of dealing with Eleanor Chen, I'd developed a healthy skepticism toward seemingly convenient coincidences. Did she leave a card or credentials? Zoe shook her head. Just said she was on a tight deadline and hoped to catch you between appointments. Tell her I'm unavailable without a scheduled interview, I decided. She can contact me through the proper channels on the website if she's legitimate. The caution proved warranted when Zoe returned looking troubled. She got really pushy when I said you weren't available. Started taking photos of the showroom with her phone until I asked her to leave. She handed me a business card. This doesn't look real. The website address doesn't match the magazine name. I examined the card, immediately noticing the inconsistencies Zoe had pointed out. A quick internet search confirmed my suspicions. No legitimate publication by that name existed, and the woman's credentials were fabricated. Corporate espionage, Eleanor pronounced when I mentioned the incident during Leo's weekend handoff. Likely from that manufacturer in Seattle that's been copying your design elements. Isn't that a bit dramatic? I asked, amused by her immediate leap to industrial skullduggery. It could just be an overeager freelancer trying to get a story. Eleanor's expression remained serious. The larger your market share grows, the more attention you'll attract. Not all of it benign. You should implement stronger security protocols for the workshop and restrictive visitor policies. I started to dismiss her concerns as typical. Eleanor overreaction, then paused, remembering how her business acumen had proven correct more often than not over the years. I'll review our procedures, I conceded. Maybe install a better security system. Andrew, arriving to collect Leo for their weekend together, caught the tail end of our conversation. Security system for what? Becca had an unauthorized visitor attempting to gather competitive intelligence, Eleanor explained before I could downplay the situation. The business requires proper protection now that it's gained significant market visibility. To my surprise, Andrew immediately sided with his mother. She's right. Success attracts attention, some of it unwelcome. My firm handles intellectual property cases for designers. I've seen how quickly unique concepts can be appropriated without proper safeguards. Their united front of concern was touching, if somewhat excessive. I'll look into better security, I promised, mainly to ease their worry. And be more careful about unscheduled visitors. Good, Eleanor said with characteristic briskness. Now, Leo has his violin recital next Thursday. I've adjusted my schedule to attend, but the timing conflicts with the school's parent-teacher conferences. And just like that, we transitioned from business security to managing Leo's increasingly complex calendar of activities. The mundane logistics that had become the foundation of our unusual family dynamic. As I watched Andrew help Leo load his weekend bag into the car, I was struck by how completely our shared priorities had realigned around Leo's well-being. The pain and betrayal that had once defined our relationship had gradually been replaced by a pragmatic partnership, focused entirely on giving our son stability and support from all sides. Eleanor lingered after Andrew and Leo departed, an unusual deviation from her typically efficient schedule. The business lawyer I recommended will be contacting you next week, she said, adjusting her immaculate silk scarf. He's prepared several entity structure options for your consideration. Thank you, I said, genuinely appreciative of her business connections, which had proven valuable numerous times over the years. I'll review them carefully. Eleanor nodded, then hesitated. There's something else I've been meaning to discuss with you. Her typically confident demeanor faltered slightly. It's somewhat personal. Curious about anything Eleanor Chen would describe as personal, I invited her to sit at the small table in my kitchen. Would you like some tea? She declined, with a small gesture, then produced an envelope from her handbag. I've been organizing family documents recently, creating a proper archive of Chen history for future generations. She placed the envelope on the table between us. I came across these photographs. I thought you might want them for Leo's memory book. Inside the envelope, I found a collection of photos I'd never seen before, candid shots from my wedding. To Andrew. Unlike the formal portraits we'd displayed in our marital home, these captured unguarded moments. Andrew and me laughing during the reception, my face alight with happiness as I conversed with guests, a quiet moment between courses, where we were looking at each other rather than the camera. I didn't know these existed, I said softly, touching the edge of a particularly lovely image where Andrew was helping me adjust a loose curl that had escaped my elaborate updo. The photographer was a family friend, Eleanor explained. He sent these informal shots separately from the contracted formal portraits. Looking at the young woman in those photographs, so confident in her future, so certain of her path, evoked a complex mixture of emotions. Nostalgia for the genuine happiness captured in those moments, grief for the dream that had died so painfully, compassion for my younger self who couldn't have imagined the challenges ahead. Why now? I asked, looking up from the photos to study Eleanor's carefully composed expression. After all these years? Eleanor met my gaze with uncharacteristic openness. Because enough time has passed, because Leo deserves to know that his parents' beginning was founded in genuine feeling, whatever came afterward. She straightened her already perfect posture. And because I've come to regret certain choices I made that contributed to the dissolution of your marriage. The acknowledgement, the closest Eleanor Chen would ever come to an outright apology, caught me completely off guard. That's unexpected. Watching you rebuild your life with such determination has been educational, she continued, her tone matter-of-fact despite the personal nature of her words. You've proven yourself to be far more resilient and capable than I initially assessed. An error in judgment I rarely make in business contexts. I couldn't help but smile at her characteristically Eleanor way of expressing respect, framing it as correcting a strategic miscalculation rather than an emotional reconciliation. High praise, coming from you. Simply accurate observation, she replied, rising to indicate the conversation's conclusion. The photographs belong in Leo's history. The past, however complicated, is still part of his story. As I walked her to the door, I was struck by how thoroughly our relationship had transformed. From bitter adversaries to wary allies to something approaching mutual respect. Not friendship, exactly, but a recognition of each other's place in the family constellation we'd created around Leo. Eleanor, I said as she prepared to leave, thank you for the photos and for evolving your perspective. She acknowledged my gratitude with a precise nod. Adaptation is essential to survival, in business and in family matters. We've all adjusted to circumstances none of us anticipated. With that quintessentially Eleanor blend of personal insight and business principle, she departed, leaving me with a collection of photographs that captured a happiness that had been real, however fleeting, and a renewed appreciation for how far we'd all traveled from those optimistic beginnings. That evening, as I added the photographs to Leo's memory book, I reflected on the strange journey that had brought me here, to a life I could never have imagined when those wedding pictures were taken, but one that had proven more authentic and empowering than the path I'd originally envisioned. Not despite the challenges that had reshaped my course, but because of them. 8 years had passed since that life-altering day when I discovered my pregnancy just as my marriage crumbled. Leo was now a vibrant 10-year-old with Andrew's analytical mind, my creative spirit, and a confidence entirely his own. The morning of Leo's school art showcase began like many others in our household. A carefully choreographed dance of breakfast preparation, last-minute homework review, and the hunt for perpetually misplaced shin guards for afternoon soccer practice. "Mom, have you seen my blue sketchbook? The one with the tiger drawing?" Leo called from his bedroom, his voice carrying the distinct note of pre-event anxiety. The showcase had been the focus of his attention for weeks, his painstakingly created, mixed-media forest scene selected as one of only 4 fifth-grade pieces to be displayed. "Check your portfolio case by the door," I replied, pouring coffee into a travel mug while simultaneously signing the permission slip for next week's Science Museum field trip. "I put it there last night after you finished the border." Leo appeared, in the kitchen doorway, portfolio and sketchbook in hand, relief evident on his face. "Found it. Do you think Dad and Nai will like it?" "They'll love it," I assured him, recognizing the importance of his entire family's approval. Nai already asked if she could have it for her office after the showcase ends. This information visibly pleased him. Eleanor's office walls, once adorned exclusively with traditional Chinese art and family photographs, now featured a rotating gallery of Leo's creative output, a tangible symbol of how thoroughly her priorities had shifted over the years. "We should probably leave in 10 minutes, I said, checking the time. "Dad's meeting us there, right?" Leo nodded, carefully placing his portfolio by the door before returning to finish his breakfast. "He said he's bringing Mr. Phillips too." I paused momentarily at the mention of James Phillips, Andrew's colleague who had gradually become a significant presence in his life over the past year. The transition from seeing Andrew as my ex-husband to acknowledging him as someone building a new relationship had been an unexpected emotional hurdle, despite the years of separation between us. "That's nice," I managed with genuine positivity. James had proven himself thoughtful and engaged with Leo, careful to respect established boundaries while building his own connection with my son. He mentioned wanting to see your work. The art showcase transformed the elementary school gymnasium into a surprisingly sophisticated gallery space. Each grade level had its own section, with the 5th graders' mixed media projects commanding the center area. Leo's forest scene, a layered creation combining painting, collage, and small found objects, drew consistent attention from circulating parents and teachers. "Remarkable texture on the tree bark," observed Ms. Moore, Leo's art teacher, as we stood before his display. "Leo has a natural understanding of how different materials can create depth. The recycled elements show real creative problem-solving." I smiled at the familiar terminology. Concepts I use daily in my furniture design had clearly influenced Leo's artistic vocabulary. He's been experimenting with material combinations since he could hold a glue stick. "It shows," she replied, warmly. "The apple doesn't fall far from the tree with artistic talent." Andrew arrived with James just as the official program began, both men in business attire that suggested they'd come directly from court or client meetings. Leo spotted them immediately, waving enthusiastically from where he sat with his classmates. "Sorry we're cutting it close," Andrew murmured as they joined me in the parent seating area. "Mediation ran long." "You're here," I assured him. That's what matters to Leo. Eleanor arrived moments later, impeccably dressed as always, but noticeably relaxed compared to her former rigid formality. She nodded acknowledgement to several parents who recognized her from school events and fundraisers before taking the seat I'd saved beside me. "Traffic was abysmal," she remarked, adjusting her silk scarf. "I presume I haven't missed Leo's project?" "Just in time," I confirmed. "They're going in alphabetical order by first name, so he'll be somewhere in the middle." As we sat through the principal's opening remarks and the first few student presentations, I found myself marveling at the tableau we presented: ex-husband and his partner, former mother-in-law, and me, all united by genuine pride in the child who connected us. What had once been a fractured family unit had reassembled itself into something different but equally valid, held together by mutual respect and shared purpose rather than traditional structure. When Leo's turn came to present his project, he stepped forward with confidence that made my heart swell. Gone was the shy toddler who had once hidden behind my legs at public gatherings. In his place stood a self-assured young artist, articulating his creative process with clarity and enthusiasm. "I wanted to show how forests are actually many layers working together," he explained to the attentive audience. "The trees, the undergrowth, the animals, even the decomposing logs. They're all connected in this big system. So I used different materials for each layer to show how they're separate, but part of the same community." His choice of metaphor wasn't lost on me. The parallel to our own unconventional family structure was striking, if unconscious on his part. Different elements, functioning independently but connected in essential ways, creating something sustainable and nurturing. After the formal presentations concluded, families circulated through the displayed artwork. Leo proudly guided our group to his forest scene, pointing out details and explaining techniques to an attentive Eleanor and genuinely interested James. Andrew caught my eye over Leo's head, his expression reflecting the same bittersweet pride. I felt gratitude for our son's confidence and resilience, recognition of how far we'd all come from those painful early days. The school's arts program has improved significantly since I joined the fundraising committee, Eleanor observed as we examined the other fifth-grade projects. The new kiln and printmaking equipment have expanded the students' technical capabilities considerably. I smiled at her characteristic blend of pride and practical assessment. Eleanor's involvement in Leo's school had evolved from occasional appearances at major events to active participation in development committees and fundraising initiatives. Her business acumen and extensive network had proven valuable assets. For the chronically underfunded arts programs she now championed with surprising passion. The spring auction exceeded the target by nearly 40%, she continued, lowering her voice slightly. "I've suggested earmarking the surplus for scholarships to the summer arts intensive." Leo mentioned several classmates with notable talent whose families might find the tuition prohibitive. This consideration for students beyond Leo, this awareness of broader community needs, represented perhaps the most remarkable evolution in Eleanor Chen. The woman who had once viewed the world exclusively through the lens of Chen family, Advantage now regularly advocated for expanded access and opportunities for Leo's peers from all socioeconomic backgrounds. "That's an excellent idea," I agreed. "Let me know if the committee needs additional support from local businesses. I've been meaning to donate a custom piece for the next auction anyway." Our conversation was interrupted by Leo's excited return. "Ms. Moore said we can take our projects home after next week's open house," he reported, bouncing slightly with barely contained energy. "But I told her Nai wanted mine for her office, if that's okay." "More than okay," Eleanor assured him, her usual reserve softening as it always did in direct interactions with her grandson. "I've already selected the perfect spot, where clients will see it immediately upon entering." Leo beamed at this confirmation of his artwork's important placement before turning to Andrew and James. "Dad, can we still get ice cream before soccer practice?" "If your mom says it's all right," Andrew deferred, our years of co-parenting having established clear protocols around schedule adjustments. I checked the time. "Quick stop only. You still need to change before practice." As our unusual family group moved toward the exit, we were stopped by Tyler's mother, a PTA officer who had initially been coolly distant toward our non-traditional arrangement, but had gradually warmed as Leo and Tyler's friendship deepened. "I wanted to thank you all for your contributions to the arts program," she said, her gaze moving between Eleanor and me. "The committee has accomplished so much this year with your help." "It's been a collaborative effort," I replied diplomatically. knowing that Eleanor's substantial financial contributions had been matched by my donation of design services for the renovated art room. Well, the showcase certainly reflects that investment, she continued. I'm hosting a small gathering for committee members next Saturday evening. I'd love for you both to attend. She hesitated briefly before adding, partners welcome, of course, with a polite nod toward Andrew and James. The casual inclusion, the assumption that we functioned as a unit despite our unconventional configuration, struck me as a significant shift from the carefully separate invitations we'd received in earlier years. Thank you. We'll check our calendars, Eleanor responded smoothly, her social polish undiminished by the complexities of our family structure. Outside in the parking lot, final arrangements were made for Leo's afternoon schedule. Ice cream, with Andrew and James, soccer practice where I would collect him, then dinner at Eleanor's where she promised to help with his science project research while I attended a late client meeting. As I watched Leo climb into Andrew's car, chattering animatedly about his project's reception, I was struck by how completely our shared priorities had transcended the painful circumstances of our past. The betrayal that had once defined my relationship with both Andrew and Eleanor had gradually been transformed into something I never could have imagined during those dark early days. A functional, supportive network centered entirely around Leo's well-being. Rebecca, Eleanor called as I turned toward my own vehicle. A moment, if you don't mind. I waited as she approached, noting how the years had softened her appearance only marginally. Still elegant and precisely put together, but with a warmth in her expression that had been absent during our early acquaintance. I've been meaning to discuss the summer arrangements, she began, referring to our annual coordination of Leo's vacation schedule. I've had a change in plans that might affect our usual timeline. Oh? I prompted, mentally reviewing the carefully balanced calendar we'd established in previous years. Time with me, time with Andrew, educational camps, and the 2 weeks Leo typically spent with Eleanor at her lake house. I've decided to reduce my role at the company, she said, the announcement delivered with characteristic directness. Effective next month, I'll be transitioning to advisory board status rather than active management. The revelation caught me completely by surprise. Eleanor Chen, stepping back from the family business she had built into an international enterprise, seemed as unlikely as the sun deciding to rise in the west. That's significant, I managed, processing the implications. Is everything all right? Perfectly fine, she assured me. Simply a matter of priorities at this stage of life. A hint of wry humor crossed her features. I find I'm increasingly unwilling to miss Leo's soccer tournaments for shareholder meetings. An unexpected development, but clear nonetheless. The admission, so human, so fundamentally grandmotherly, from a woman who had once organized her entire existence around corporate ambition left me momentarily speechless. Given this transition, Eleanor continued practically, I'd like to extend the lake house visit to 3 weeks, if that suits your schedule. I'm planning several educational excursions that would be enriched by additional time. I think that could work, I said, mentally rearranging summer plans. Leo would certainly be thrilled with extra time at the lake. Excellent, Eleanor nodded briskly, then hesitated before adding, You would be welcome to join us for a portion of the stay, if your business commitments allow. The property has sufficient space for privacy, and Leo mentioned wanting to show you the improvements to the boat dock we completed last year. The invitation represented yet another evolution in our relationship, from the tense handoffs of early co-parenting to the comfortable shared family gatherings of recent years, and now to this, a voluntary extension of time together beyond what Leo's schedule required. I'd like that, I said honestly. Thank you. Eleanor acknowledged my acceptance with a small nod before turning the conversation to more immediate logistics regarding Leo's science project supplies. Yet the significance of the moment lingered between us, a recognition that the connections we'd built around Leo had grown into something valuable in their own right. independent of our original contentious beginning. Later that evening, after collecting Leo from soccer practice and delivering him to Eleanor's for their research session, I arrived at my client meeting with a sense of perspective that had been building throughout the day. The couple seeking a custom dining table for their newly renovated home represented the kind of high-end commission that had become the cornerstone of Renewed Beginnings' success, discerning clients who valued sustainability and craftsmanship equally. "We've admired your work for years," the wife explained as we reviewed material samples in their elegant Pearl District loft. "Especially the way you honor the history of reclaimed materials while creating something thoroughly contemporary." "That balance is central to my design philosophy," I agreed, showing them sketches of the table I envisioned for their space, a piece that would incorporate salvaged timber from a historic Portland brewery while featuring clean, modern lines. "It's remarkable how you've built this business," her husband commented, examining my portfolio with genuine interest. "Creating something so successful from scratch couldn't have been easy." The observation, though casually made, resonated deeply with my reflections from earlier in the day. "Building something meaningful rarely follows a straight path," I replied, "but the detours often lead to more interesting destinations than we originally planned." As I drove home after finalizing the commission, I found myself thinking about the journey that had brought me to this point, professionally fulfilled, parentally confident, and personally at peace in ways I couldn't have imagined on that devastating day when Andrew had revealed his secret vasectomy and our marriage had imploded. The workshop and living space that had once felt like a temporary landing place had evolved into a true home, filled with evidence of both my thriving business and Leo's expanding world. The wounds that had once seemed impossible to heal had gradually scarred over, leaving me stronger in the broken places. When I arrived home, I found a text message from Andrew with photos from the ice cream outing, Leo with a precariously balanced triple scoop, James helping him salvage the melting creation, both of them laughing at the improvised solution involving multiple napkins and quick reflexes. "He had a great time," Andrew had written. "James suggested rock climbing this weekend, if you're on board. Said he noticed Leo has natural balance from all that tree climbing at Eleanor's lake house. The easy communication, the thoughtful observations about our son, the respectful inclusion of me in planning activities, all of it reflected how thoroughly our relationship had transformed from bitter adversaries to effective co-parents to something approaching friends." I texted back my agreement about the rock climbing, then added a photo I'd taken of Leo proudly standing beside his art project. Andrew responded almost immediately with a thumbs-up emoji and, "Artist genes definitely come from your side." The simple exchange, mundane in its content but profound in what it represented, brought a smile as I prepared for bed. From my nightstand, I picked up the small wooden box Eleanor had given me on Leo's 5th birthday, an exquisite piece of Chinese craftsmanship that had been in the Chen family for generations. "For keeping treasured memories," she had explained when presenting it, an olive branch disguised as a practical gift. Inside, I kept the mementos that marked significant moments in our unconventional family journey: Leo's hospital bracelet, the first family court document that established our co-parenting agreement, the business card from my first major commission, the program from Leo's kindergarten graduation, where Andrew and Eleanor had sat beside me in unexpected harmony. I added the showcase program to this collection, another marker in our ongoing evolution. As I closed the box, my phone chimed with a text from Eleanor. "Leo has completed his research with excellent focus. We've organized his findings according to scientific method principles. He's now asleep in the guest room that he insists on calling his room. You're welcome to collect him in the morning before school if that suits your schedule." The message concluded with a photograph of Leo curled up in the bedroom that had indeed gradually transformed from Eleanor's formal guest suite into a personalized space filled with his belongings: books, sports equipment, the telescope Andrew had given him for his birthday, and walls adorned with framed examples of his artwork that Eleanor had professionally mounted. I texted back my thanks and confirmed I'd pick him up in the morning, then added, "The showcase was wonderful today. Thank you for all you've done to support the arts program at his school." Eleanor's response came promptly. "His talent deserves proper nurturing, as does all potential, regardless of circumstance." The philosophical observation, so different from the rigid status consciousness that had once characterized her worldview, was followed by a brief addendum. "The Chen Gallery Board meets next week. Your name has been suggested for the vacant seat. Would you be interested?" The invitation to join the board of Portland's most prestigious private art gallery, an institution Eleanor had helped establish decades earlier, represented the ultimate acknowledgement of my place in the creative community. More significantly, it marked Eleanor's public recognition of my professional accomplishments independent of my former connection to the Chen family. "I'd be honored," I replied simply. "Thank you for thinking of me." As I set my phone aside and turned out the light, I reflected on the strange alchemy that had transformed devastating loss into unexpected growth, a process not unlike the furniture restoration that had become my livelihood and passion. What had begun as a desperate attempt to survive had evolved into something more authentic and meaningful than the life I had originally planned. The journey hadn't been linear or simple. There had been setbacks along the way, moments when old wounds reopened, when boundaries needed reinforcement, when Andrew's growing relationship with James required adjustments to our co-parenting rhythm. Yet through it all, we had somehow managed to keep Leo's well-being at the center, allowing our shared commitment to his happiness to guide us through complicated emotional terrain. Morning arrived with the familiar sounds of Portland rain against the windows and my phone alarm playing the gentle melody I'd selected years ago. As I prepared for the day ahead, client meetings, workshop supervision, Leo's afternoon dentist appointment, I found myself looking forward to the future with genuine optimism. At 41, I had built a life that bore little resemblance to what I'd envisioned during my marriage to Andrew, yet felt infinitely more authentic. Renewed Beginnings had grown from a desperate side gig into a nationally recognized brand with a waiting list for commissioned pieces. My relationship with Leo was strong and secure, built on openness and resilience rather than conventional family structure. Even my connections with Andrew and Eleanor had evolved into something productive, and in their own way, nurturing. The rain had lightened to a gentle mist by the time I arrived at Eleanor's house to collect Leo for school. He bounded out to the car with characteristic energy, backpack and science project materials in tow, chattering immediately about the additional research he and Eleanor had completed. "Nai helped me find this really cool experiment about deforestation effects that nobody else in class will have," he explained as he buckled his seatbelt. "And she said maybe this summer we could visit that environmental research center near the lake house if you come with us for part of the trip." "That sounds interesting," I agreed, navigating through morning traffic toward his school. "I'm planning to join you for at least a week this year." Leo's face brightened. "Awesome. Dad and James might come for a few days too. James knows how to water ski. He said he could teach me if it's okay with you and Nai." The casual way Leo incorporated all the adults in his life into a cohesive whole, without the awkwardness or tension that often characterized blended family arrangements, reflected the careful groundwork we'd all laid over the years. Each addition or change had been introduced with transparency and respect, creating a foundation of security that allowed him to adapt without anxiety. "It's going to be a great summer," I assured him as we pulled up to the school drop-off lane. "But first, you've got to rock this science project." Leo gathered his materials, then paused before opening the car door. "Mom? Tyler asked me something yesterday, and I didn't know what to say." "What's that?" I prompted, curious about his sudden seriousness. "He wanted to know if I wish you and Dad still lived together, like his parents do." Leo's expression was thoughtful, rather than troubled. "I told him I don't really think about it that way. Our family just works differently, but it still works great. Was that okay to say? The simple wisdom in his response caught me off guard, a lump forming in my throat as I recognized how completely he had internalized the lessons we'd tried to model. That family comes in many forms, that love and support matter more than conventional structure. That was perfect, I managed, reaching over to squeeze his hand. Absolutely perfect. He flashed a quick smile before hopping out of the car. Cool. See you after school. Don't forget we're supposed to bring cupcakes for Emma's birthday tomorrow. And with that mundane reminder, the ordinary stuff of parenting that anchored our extraordinary journey, he was gone, racing toward the school entrance where friends waited, secure in the knowledge that his unconventional family had created something stable and loving around him, despite, or perhaps because of its broken beginning. As I pulled away from the curb, my phone rang through the car speakers, Zoe calling from the workshop with questions about an incoming lumber delivery. The day was unfolding with its usual mix of parenting logistics and business demands, the carefully calibrated balance I'd established over years of single motherhood and entrepreneurship. Yet beneath the routine tasks lay a profound appreciation for how thoroughly my life had transformed since that devastating moment when Andrew had revealed his betrayal and my world had collapsed. Like the discarded materials I transformed in my workshop, what had initially seemed broken beyond repair had instead become the foundation for something stronger and more authentic than what had existed before. My mother-in-law's lies about my fertility, intended to protect her son and family reputation, had inadvertently set me on a path to discovering my own resilience and creativity. The pregnancy announcement that had changed everything had indeed transformed our lives, just not in the way any of us could have anticipated. The irony wasn't lost on me as I headed toward the workshop to begin another day of turning cast-off materials into things of beauty and purpose. Sometimes the most profound transformations begin with devastating loss. Sometimes the most authentic lives emerge from the ruins of carefully constructed facades. And sometimes, the family you build from the ashes of broken dreams proves stronger than anything you could have originally imagined. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.